Chapter 85. Zagru said, "What Ming Ming said just now is very true. For this mission, we would rather destroy the sacred source as a last resort. This last resort is not only about being forced into a desperate situation, but it can also be explained as a last resort when any of the Zodiac Guardian warriors are in danger. After all, there are only 13 of you, and none of you can be lost. As the king of the Zodiac, you must bear this in mind. Of course, protecting yourself is also the most important thing." Chiyu said with a straight face, "Master, don't worry. This time, however many of us go, we will definitely come back. Even if the worst-case scenario is for the Westerners to get their hands on the sacred source, compared to the sacred source, any of our brothers and sisters are much more important. I won't lead everyone to fight to the death. We're just looking for opportunities to disrupt the Westerners and the Sun Nation's plans." Zagru smiled and said, "I'm relieved that you can think this way. Alright, you should go back and cultivate. I notice that you are very considerate of everyone now. Every time you cultivate, you will deliberately spread your aura throughout the entire villa to help everyone improve their thundercloud force. Chiyu, maybe you haven't noticed it yourself, but you are slowly growing." Zagru patted Chiyu's shoulder and walked upstairs with a smile. Chiyu looked at his back as he left and said to himself helplessly, "This guy, Ming Ming, is not even as old as I am. He is always acting like an elder. No wonder he has the power of Buddha from 10 lives." The next morning, when all the Zodiac Guardian warriors arrived at the capital airport, Lu Yuan was already waiting there. He didn't even have any luggage with him, just a simple cultivator's outfit. He looked like he was traveling to Yunnan. "Mr. Qi, you are here." Lu Yuan's gaze swept across the crowd and finally landed on Vol and Master Zaglu, whom he had never met before. He even saw Yen Xiaoi at the gay bar last time. But it was the first time that Vol and Zagru met each other. When his gaze passed by the Vol, it only paused for a moment, but when he saw Master Zagru, his gaze clearly froze, followed by a very surprised look. "Mr. Qi, who is this?" Lu Yuan asked Chiyu. Chiyu said, "This is one of our partners. You even met the door. You can call him Zagru. Because he's an ethnic minority, his name is a little strange." Lu Yuan nodded and took the initiative to walk up to Zagru. "Hello, I'm Lu Yuan from the Vatican." As he spoke, he extended his right hand to Zagru. Zaglu smiled and shook his hand, saying, "Hello, I'm Zaglu." In order to not be recognized, Zaglu smiled. In order not to be recognized, Zagru's attire was a little strange today. He wore Su Dong's casual clothes and a baseball cap to cover his bald head. Lu Yuan's eyes flashed. "I don't know why, although today is the first time we meet, I have a very strange sense of intimacy towards Mr. Zagru. I've only felt this feeling from the Pope." Hearing Lu Yuan call him Mr. Zagru, Yen Xiaoi, who was drinking soy milk at the side, almost spat it out. Even though he tried to hold it in, he still couldn't help but cough violently. The other Zodiac Guardian God warriors beside him also couldn't help but smile. Lu Yuan was a little stunned. "Did I say something wrong? I've carefully studied the etiquette of Yan Huang, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong." Chiyu held back his laughter and said, "No, you didn't say anything wrong. You've already done very well. This Mr. Zagru is the youngest capable person in our Eastern Guardian. In the future, you guys can get to know each other better." Lu Yuan nodded and smiled. "That's for sure. Everyone, let's go get our boarding passes first, then we can continue talking inside." Everyone queued up to get their boarding passes. At this moment, while they were waiting for the plane, Jida had already left the capital on the previous flight. He had gone to Dali before them. Yesterday, Chiyu had spoken to Jida on the phone before training. After a discussion, Jida decided to go to Yunnan first. Not only that, but he also wanted to familiarize himself with his new subordinate. That way, he could display his effectiveness in this operation. To Chiyu, sitting on a plane was originally a very painful thing. However, the situation this time was much better. On his left sat Ryue, and on his right sat Ming Ming. With two beauties accompanying him and other companions around him, he also had the ability to fly. His fear of heights was not as obvious as before. Lu Yuan sat in front of Qi Yu, together with Grandmaster Zagru. He was obviously very interested in Zagru. From Zagru's holy aura, he did not feel any strong energy fluctuations. However, the feeling that Zagru gave him was too special. Just as he had said, the feeling that Zagru gave him was something that had only appeared on the Pope before. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors followed Qi Yu's advice last night. They closed their eyes and entered a semi-meditative state of training. So did Ryue. Of course, she did not really cultivate. She was always paying attention to Qi Yu's fear of heights. He did not show it because he was in front of Ming Ming. Ming Ming obviously did not have the same scruples as Ryue. The first time Qi Yu took a plane, he was with her. Now that he had another chance, Qi Yu naturally held Ming Ming's hand tightly. His body leaned on Ming Ming, and he felt indescribably comfortable. Amidst the rumbling of the engine, the passenger plane from Southeast Airlines successfully took off from Beijing Airport and flew in the direction of Yunnan. After a short period of nervousness, Qi Yu found that he was not as afraid of flying as before. He could not help but feel relieved. Of course, his actions would not change. Leaning on Ming Ming's elastic body, he smelled her alluring fragrance. It was definitely a very enjoyable thing. Soon, the plane entered a stable taxiing state. Through the side window, they could see the bright and somewhat dazzling sunlight outside. Under such good weather, it would take about 4 hours to reach Yunnan. Unconsciously, Qi Yu also gradually entered a state of training. Because Lu Yuan was in front of him, he did not show his Kirin aura too obviously. He just held Ming Ming's hand and communicated with his Kirin energy with Ming Ming. He helped Ming Ming stabilize her thundercloud force that had just been upgraded to 5 clouds. At the same time, the two of them were also improving their thundercloud force. After entering 4 clouds, the thundercloud force was purer and more condensed than the thundercloud force at 3 cloud. If the thundercloud force at 1 cloud was Qi, then the performance of 2 clouds in the body would be like clouds. The second cloud would be like a cloud in his body, and the third cloud would be like water vapor. Now, the fourth cloud would be like water. This was just a metaphor used to describe the purity of the cloud power. In fact, when Qi Yu circulated the cloud power in his body, he realized that the cloud power in his body had turned into a liquid state like water. The circulation speed was much slower than before, but of course, the cloud power did not really turn into water. Thundercloud force would never become liquid. Thundercloud force was thundercloud force. They would always be the same. The only difference was the degree of combination between the energy molecules of thundercloud force. When thundercloud force entered 4 clouds, they looked like liquid. When Qi Yu entered 4 clouds, his thundercloud force was twice as strong as that of 3 clouds. However, his thundercloud force of thunder attribute and thundercloud force of water attribute had been automatically upgraded to 5 clouds. Only his thundercloud force of wind attribute and fire attribute needed to be cultivated. Therefore, if he only used the thundercloud force of thunder attribute or fire attribute, he could be on par with Hai Ryue. If he used 4 clouds at the same time, his power would be unknown. Qi Yu slowly activated his own thundercloud force. Although it took him more time to run 1 cloud circle than before, after 9 small cloud circles, Qi Yu felt that his body was more comfortable than running 1 cloud circle. The purple, blue, red and cyan cloud lines intertwined in his 8 meridians. Every time he reached an acupoint, he could gather more thundercloud force. However, only the fire thundercloud force and the wind thundercloud force increased, because the other 2 thundercloud force had been saturated. Before Qi Yu reached the 5 clouds realm, his acupoints could not gather and absorb external energy molecules. Qi Yu did not practice Kirin's ascending to cloud technique this time. Instead, he practiced Kiran's skill. For him, the most important thing now was to recover his potential. Even if Kiran's ascending to cloud technique did not completely absorb the thundercloud force, it would consume his potential quickly. However, Kiran's skill was different. Although it was slower, it had a certain effect on recovering his potential. Moreover, Chi-Yu had tried it and found that Kiran's skill and Kiran's ascending to cloud technique did not conflict with each other. Kiran's ascending to cloud technique was originally derived from Kiran's skill. Using Kiran's skill and Kiran's skill alternately to practice Kiran's skill was much faster than using only one practice method. When Chi-Yu practiced with Kiran's tactics, he did not separate his spiritual force from his close friend. It was not that he could not separate his spiritual force with Kiran's tactics, but he did not think it was necessary. He did not need to worry about any danger when he sat with others on the plane. Moreover, the Kiran's tactics did not require special control like Kiran's ascending cloud grand method. After another night's rest, Chi-Yu's physical condition had recovered to 80%. Although he was not in the best state, he could deal with anything. Time always passed quickly in the process of practicing. When Chi-Yu felt weightless, the plane had already landed in Kunming Airport, the capital of Yunnan Province. To go to Dali, they had to pass through Kunming and transfer from there. Although they had prepared for it, when they arrived in Kunming, Chi-Yu and some of the Zodiac guardian god warriors who did not come to the south of China were still shocked. The temperature here was at least 20 degrees lower than that in the capital. The warm weather was only suitable for wearing unlined clothes. Everyone ran to the airport's restroom to change clothes. When the plane arrived in Kunming, it was already afternoon. Dali was originally a tourist destination. In history, it was the capital of the Dali kingdom. The ancient city of Dali faced the rippling Irai Lake in the east and the evergreen Tsang Mountain in the west. This time, they were going to get Chongqing Temple, one of the 3 major temples in Dali. Hai Ryue made a phone call, and 2 cars arrived in a short while. She had a branch office in Yunnan, so it was easy for her to get 2 cars. Chi-Yu, Ming, and Hai Ryue were in the same car. Together with Master Zagru, Vol, Modi, and Lu Yuan, there were 7 of them. Su Dong, Ian, Hu Guang, Guan Ping, and Yen Xiaoi were in the same car. The 2 cars were very big. Both of them were standard Buick MPV business class with 3 rows of seats. It was really comfortable to sit in an American car. The drivers were arranged by Ryue in advance. Dali Chongqing Temple was one of the famous tourist attractions in Yunnan. Since they were here, their goal was naturally to go to the vicinity of Chongqing Temple. After they settled down, they would decide what to do according to the situation. Chi-Yu almost called Master, but he suddenly remembered that Lu Yuan was there, so he quickly changed his words. Master. Oh, Mr. Jia, do you know anything about Chongqing Temple? Zaglu smiled faintly and said, I know a little, but it's only on the surface. Chongqing Temple was located about 1 kilometer north of Dali. The snow-capped mountains, the silver-carved Diantsang Mountain stood behind, and the billowing Irai Lake was embedded in front of it. The 3 pagodas stood like a tripod, supporting the sky and the earth. The jade pillar marked the sky, majestic and magnificent. It was one of the scenic spots in Tsang Irai. According to historical records such as Unofficial History of Nanzhao and General Strategy of Ancient Times, the holy monk Li Qingmei built 3 pagodas, 890 houses, 11,400 Buddhas, and 40,590 kilograms of copper. The pagodas were built from the 10th ruler of Nanzhao, Fengyu, from the 10th year of Baohe to the 1st year of Tianqi, which was 834 to 840 years of AD. The construction cost 70,800 people, gold, silver, silk, and brocade, which was worth 43,514 kilograms of gold. Lu Yuan said in surprise, Mr. Jia, I didn't expect you to know so much about Chongqing Temple. You even remember the data so clearly. Zagru smiled and said, These are the treasures of Yanwang. As a descendant of Yan Huang, these are our pride. However, compared to Chongqing Temple, the 3 pagodas of Dali are more famous. 3 pagodas? Chi Yu's heart skipped a beat. Zagru nodded and said, the 3 pagodas of Dali are built in Chongqing Temple. They are known as the 3 pagodas and Buddha's secret craftsmanship. The main pagoda of the 3 pagodas is called Qian Sun Pagoda. It is 13 meters tall and is a square 16-story pagoda. It is a typical building of the Tang dynasty along with the big and small wild goose pagodas in Xi'an. Looking up from the bottom of the pagoda, one could see the pagoda reaching the cloud. The pagoda was stationary and looked like it was going to collapse. The base of the pagoda was square and divided into 2 levels. The lower level was 33.5 meters long and was surrounded by stone railings. The pillars at the 4 corners of the railings were carved with stone lions. The upper level was 21 meters long and in the middle of the east was a stone wall. On it there were 4 big words inscribed by Mu Shiji, the descendant of the Duke of Guizhou Muing, forever guarding the mountains and rivers. The first level of the pagoda was 13.5 meters high. It was the highest level in the entire pagoda. The east door was 2 meters away from the base while the west door was 6 meters away. The pagoda wall was 3.5 meters thick. The 2nd to the 15th levels were basically the same and their sizes were similar. The 16th level was the top of the pagoda. Taking the 2nd level as an example, it was about 2 meters high and 10 meters wide. The upper level was built with overlapping eaves. There were 17 layers of bricks and each layer was 0.05 to 0.07 meters high. The 4 corners of the eaves were tilted upwards. There were Buddhist shrines in the middle of the east and west sides of the pagoda. There was a statue of Buddha inside. On both sides of the shrine, there was a small pavilion shrine with a lotus seat and a hall-like roof. There was a piece of Sanskrit inlaid in the middle. On the north and south sides, there was a coupon-shaped window in the middle that led straight to the center of the pagoda. On the 3rd level, there were Buddhist shrines on the north and south sides and windows on the east and west side. The pagoda shrunk the higher it went. The top of the pagoda was 8 meters high, which was about 1/7 of the pagoda. The tall and straight pagoda gave people a feeling that it was out of this world and pierced through the cloud. At the top of the pagoda was a bronze gourd-shaped vase. At the bottom of the vase was an octagonal lid with wings spread out at the 4 corners. There was a wind-striking blade. At the bottom of the vase was a steel frame and copper skin. At the bottom was an alms bowl with a lotus seat. At the 4 corners of the pagoda there were originally golden rocks. It was said that dragons respected the pagoda but feared the rocks. Dali used to be the dragon swamp, so it was used to guard it. Now, the golden rocks were no more. Before the restoration, only the feet of the golden rocks remained. The Qian Sun Pagoda was hollow. There was a simple wooden ladder that led to the top of the pagoda. On the west side of the Qian Sun Pagoda, about 70 meters apart, there were 2 small pagoda in the north and south. They were octagonal and 10 levels of brick pagoda with secret eave. Each of them was 42 and 19 meters tall. There were Buddhist statues, lotus flowers, vases and other reliefs on the pagoda. The 1st to 8th levels were hollow and straight with a cross inside. The base of the pagoda was also octagonal. The distance between the 2 pagodas was 97 meters. The 3 pagodas formed a tripod. The layout was consistent, and the shape was harmonious. When talking about this sacred land of Buddhism, it was as if he was familiar with it. Not only was Lu Yuan dumbfounded, but even Qi Yu and the other Zodiac guardian warriors couldn't help but admire him. As expected of an eminent monk. That's all I know. This is what I've read about it. As for the specific details, I'm not very clear. Zagru smiled modestly. Lu Yuan smiled bitterly. Isn't it clear enough? Mr. Qi, I'm starting to feel that it's a very wise decision to cooperate with you. After all, this is your place. Qi Yu had a different feeling. He could faintly feel that Xing Yuan being near the Chongqing temple was very beneficial to them. Who knew what was so special about this ancient temple? Although Zagru didn't explicitly say anything, it was obvious that he had a deep understanding of this place. Maybe he could bring him some surprises. The two business-class cars drove very fast. When they entered the territory of Dali, everyone was immediately stunned by the beautiful scenery in front of them. From afar, they could already see the Tsang Mountain. The Tsang Mountain had two colors. The lower part of the mountain was covered with a variety of coniferous forests. It was dark green, and the upper part was completely covered with snow. The sky in Dali was much clearer than in the city. The sapphire sky was dotted with white clouds. The clean and clear feeling made people feel relaxed and happy. In front of the magnificent Tsang Mountain, there was a large and unusually clear lake. Needless to say, this was the Arai Lake that Zagru mentioned. The snowy mountains and clear water were the ultimate scenery. Between the Tsang Mountain and the Arai Lake, there were 3 towering white pagodas, 1 big and 2 small. The pagodas were reflected in the Arai Lake. The strange feeling made everyone's heart feel special. Ming Ming exclaimed, "It's really beautiful here. It's like a paradise." Ryua nodded and said, "Being here, it's like my heart has been cleansed. I used to be too busy with work. I didn't expect our motherland to have such a beautiful place." Lu Yuan agreed, "This is definitely one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've never seen such a scenery. The snowy mountains and clear water are actually connected, and the 3 white pagodas are like a bridge." Zagru smiled and said, "Those 3 pagodas should be the 3 pagodas of Dali in the Chongqing temple. It's a pity that the Chongqing temple was destroyed a lot. Otherwise, this place would have become more beautiful." Ryua said, "Let's stay in the city first. Anyway, the distance between the Supreme Court and the Chongqing temple is only about a kilometer." Chi Yu stared out of the window without saying a word. He was also greatly shocked. At the same time, he also faintly felt the existence of several powerful energies. Perhaps because these energies were too powerful, the other Zodiac Guardian warriors did not feel the same as him. But Chi Yu knew that Zagru must have felt what he felt. When the Tsang Mountain of Arai appeared, Zagru's temperament seemed to have completely changed, as if he had integrated with the snowy mountains and clear water in front of him. This should be the realm of the oneness of heaven and man. In this case, what could be hidden from his perception? Under Ryua's command, the 2 business-class cars directly drove into the city. Everyone gradually stopped admiring the beautiful scenery. Lu Yuan quietly made 2 phone calls and said something in a foreign language. Although Chi Yu did not understand, he knew that Lu Yuan was contacting the people of the Vatican. After hanging up, Lu Yuan turned to Chi Yu and said, "Mr. Chi, our men are in Dali City. However, the people from the Covenant of Darkness have already arrived. As for the Greek protectors, they have yet to discover them. You are right. This time, the Sun Nation has also sent people, but those clowns are nothing to us." A cold light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes and said, "We can't underestimate any enemy. It's better for us to be careful. Since your people have arrived, have you found the specific location of the sacred source?" Lu Yuan nodded and said, "I can't tell the specific location, but I'm sure of its general location. It's just that the energy fluctuations of the sacred source are a little unstable these few days. They come and go, so I can't be sure. When we arrive, we can start looking for it. At least, we can find it before the people of the Covenant of Darkness." At the mention of the Covenant of Darkness, Chi Yu could not help but think of Su Qing. He did not know how she was now. If what vampire Prince Klinsmann said was true, she should have fused with the red-gold primordial blood. What would Su Qing look like after turning into a vampire? He hoped that her mind would not fall into darkness. At the thought of Su Qing, Chi Yu's heart could not help but sink. As long as there was a chance, he would do his best to rescue Su Qing. After entering Dali City, everyone immediately checked into the hotel that Hai Ryua had arranged. Although Dali was a tourist attraction, it was still a remote place, so there were not many high-end hotels. The place that Hai Ryue had arranged was considered clean. Chi-yu and Su-dong shared a room, while Ryue and Ming-ming shared a room. Other than Modi, who had a room alone, the rest of the people were arranged in pairs. Of course, the clowns Hu Guang and Ian also shared a room. After everyone had settled down, Lu Yuan said goodbye to Chi-yu and left quietly. Chi-yu did not stop him, nor did he ask him anything. At this time, both sides needed to make use of each other, so Chi-yu was not afraid of him playing tricks. As soon as Lu Yuan left, Chi-yu immediately made 2 phone calls before returning to his room. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely be tired after a day of traveling, but it was nothing for the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. Everyone's nervous mood had relaxed a lot because of the beautiful scenery. They each adjusted their state of mind in their room. They all knew that it would not be long before the real battle began. As soon as Chi-yu returned to his room, the Sarira bead on his wrist emitted a warm stream of air, and his spiritual force moved slightly. Chi-yu returned to the door and opened it. Zagru stood outside the door and nodded. Chi-yu hurriedly let him in. "You also felt it, right?" Zagru said calmly. Chi-yu nodded slightly and said, "Yes, those auras are very strong, but I can't determine which one belongs to the sacred source." Zagru said, "It seems that we will have to face another force this time. My Buddha Chi can clearly sense the existence of 2 fierce beasts here. They seem to be guarding something, but they are also afraid of something. Perhaps it has something to do with the sacred source. We must be careful when we move. These fierce beasts are definitely not any weaker than the Covenant of Darkness. One of them even has the strength of a 10,000-year fierce beast. That is not easy to deal with." 10,000-year fierce beast? After hearing Zagru's words, Chi-yu and Su-dong could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Although they had never really faced a 10,000-year fierce beast, they could imagine how terrifying it was from their encounter with the deep-sea nether snake. Although the power of the deep-sea nether serpent with more than 9,900 years of cultivation was already very terrifying, the strength of a 10,000-year beast was much stronger even though there was only a 1-year difference. During the era of the ancient giant beasts, even the King Kirin would find it difficult to deal with a 10,000-year fierce beast, let alone the Zodiac Guardian Warriors whose strength was not even at the 6 clouds level. The fierce beasts had always been the Zodiac Guardian Warriors' mortal enemies. If they really encountered one, the situation would be very unpredictable. The existence of a 10,000-year fierce beast made the whole situation even more complicated. Chi-yu fell into deep thought. His brain was working quickly to think of a way to deal with it. Zagru said, "You don't have to worry too much. We will temporarily bide our time and see how the Covenant of Darkness, the Vatican, and the Greek Guardians react. If those 2 fierce beasts are really related to the sacred source, then they will definitely not sit by and watch anyone covet the sacred source. Therefore, we can't be too aggressive right now." Chi-yu smiled. "Master, is this considered killing with a borrowed knife?" Zagru's face stiffened. "Amit ba Chi-yu, can't you stop provoking me?" Chi-yu said calmly, "I am also training your Buddhist heart. It should be good for you." Zagru really couldn't do anything to him. He smiled bitterly and said, "I feel that one of the 2 fierce beasts is in Arai, and the other is in the Tsang Mountains. I don't know what it is exactly. The fierce beasts in the sea have more than 6,000 years of cultivation, and the ones in the mountains are the king fierce beasts, which are at the 10,000-year level. Lu Yuan didn't lie to us just now. The so-called sacred source should be near Chongming Temple, and its aura is very unstable. Its energy is always lingering around Chongming Temple, so it won't be difficult to find it. But we can't be too hasty now." Chi-yu thought for a moment and said, "Let's eat first. The Vatican and the Dark Parliament are confronting each other, so they won't make a move easily. Since everyone is waiting for an opportunity, we might as well relax a little and gain the upper hand by striking later." Su Dong smiled and said, Chi Yu, you also know how to use tactics now. Not bad. Chi Yu unhappily replied, although I haven't studied much, I've read quite a lot of novels. How can I not understand this little bit of strategy? Furthermore, it's not just a competition of strength. Luck is equally important. When it comes to luck, do you think anyone can compare with me, the auspicious sign? Although his words sounded a little arrogant, he was right about Kiran's auspicious sign. The auspicious sign itself was one of the abilities. Although there was a lot of uncertainty, judging from Chi Yu's several narrow escapes from death and the speed at which the strength of his companions improved, his auspicious sign was indeed real. Although the food in Yunnan tasted good, most of the Zodiac guardian god warriors were northerners, so they couldn't adapt to the southern food. Of course, one person was an exception. After eating a portion of food for 10 people, the taste was not very important for instrumental music. The most important thing for him was to fill his stomach and try his best to restore his body to the best state. The sky darkened very early in Dali, perhaps because it was winter. Although the temperature here was a little lower than in Kunming, it was still much higher than in the capital. It was a very comfortable temperature. In the distance, the sun gradually set. The clean clouds in the sky were dyed golden red, setting off the snow-capped mountains, clear water, and white towers. The already beautiful scenery was even more gorgeous. Lu Yuan called Chi Yu and informed him that he had found out the whereabouts of the Covenant of Darkness. Now the people of the Vatican were on guard. He hoped that Chi Yu and the others could meet up with them as soon as they were ready. It was obviously not a wise choice to deal with the Covenant of Darkness at night. Lu Yuan said that he had already sent people to monitor the people of the Covenant of Darkness. When the sun shone on the earth tomorrow morning, they would eliminate the threat of the Covenant of Darkness. As long as this big threat was eliminated, it would be much easier to deal with the Greek Guardian. Of course, Chi Yu agreed to Lu Yuan's words. As soon as he hung up the phone, he immediately discussed with the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. After a short discussion, everyone agreed that they needed to be more proactive. After some discussion, Chi Yu decided to take advantage of the fact that they had just arrived to investigate the mysteries of the sacred source as soon as possible. Chapter 86. Chi Yu said, Master, I understand what you mean. Although we don't know if the Covenant of Darkness and the Vatican have discovered the existence of the beasts, as long as one of them makes a move, the other won't just sit back and watch. It'll be even more interesting if those two beasts get involved. Let them fight first, then we'll be the oriole behind the mantis stalking the cicada. Su Dong said, I'm afraid the Vatican and the Covenant of Darkness have the same idea. So, they must be very cautious. It's better for us to think more carefully. Ryue said, We're not afraid of waiting. There's bound to be one side that can't wait anymore. If the Covenant of Darkness doesn't make a move tonight, we can really work with the Vatican and at least deal a heavy blow to them tomorrow. Chi Yu shook his head and said, There's no rush. Tomorrow depends on the situation. Currently, the Covenant of Darkness seems to be our biggest threat, but the more hidden they are, the more dangerous they are. I still feel that our biggest competitor should be the Greek Guardians, then the Vatican, and finally the Covenant of Darkness. As for the people from the Sun Nation, they're just small fries. It's best if they don't show up. If they do, we'll focus our strength and destroy them first. Ryue said, All right, we'll split into 2 groups for tonight's operation. Ming Ming, Chi Yu, and Su Dong. The 4 of us have reached the 5-cloud level. Although Chi Yu is a 4-cloud level, his overall strength is also above the 5-cloud level. We'll do the first wave of investigation. The rest of you stay here with Master. We'll keep in touch. If we encounter any problems, we'll call for help. Protecting Master is the most important. Even if we don't succeed this time, we must retreat in one piece. In terms of strength, Ryue's arrangement was very reasonable. Just when Chi Yu thought no one had any objections, Hu Guang suddenly said, Since there's a beast in Arai, How about I put some poison in it? Even if we can't poison it to death, it's good to make it suffer. Maybe when it starts to stir up trouble, we can pray for it to disrupt the situation. Chi Yu looked at the wretched glint in his eyes and said, Are you willing to destroy the clear waters of Arai? This. Although Hu Guang came from the underworld, it didn't mean that he didn't like beautiful things. Zagru shook his head and said, Absolutely not. Let's not talk about how much damage your poison will cause to that ferocious beast. Just for the sake of the countless creatures in Arai, you can't do this. Hu Guang said helplessly, Then forget it. It's just a suggestion. It seems that even if it's poisonous, we can't just expel it. I'd better go to the toilet to detoxify myself. As he spoke, he turned around and walked towards the toilet. Ian chuckled and said with a cigarette in his mouth, I can't compare to you when it comes to shitting. It'd be best if you shit to death. Hu Guang stared at him with his small eyes and said, That's right, you can't compare to me. Who asked me to poop, Ian? Damn, can you guys not be so disgusting? Even the usually calm Guan Ping couldn't take it anymore. Chi Yu laughed and said, All right, since the matter has been settled, we'll start when the sky is completely dark. Vol, you and Little E stay by Master's side and take care of him. The sunset was infinitely beautiful, but it was almost dusk. The beautiful scenery of the evening did not last for too long before it quietly left and disappeared into the west. Stars could be seen clearly in the clean sky, and the temperature was obviously much lower than during the day. Chi Yu and the other three quietly left the hotel. They were not in a hurry to find the sacred origin. Under Zagru's guidance, Chi Yu could now distinguish the three powerful auras. He carefully used his Qilin aura to sense the direction of the sacred origin's aura. He also paid attention to the movements of the two powerful beasts and circled around them. Only then did he carefully lead the other three in the direction of the sacred origin. Although Dali had been developed for a long time, in order to better preserve the beautiful scenery, the Yanhuang Republic did not build many places that were truly man-made. Therefore, most of the places here were still in their original state, especially outside Dali, where this situation was even more obvious. Chi Yu and the other three quietly approached Chongming Temple. They did not fly, and under Chi Yu's lead, they approached the three pagodas from the best angle. Stop. Chi Yu's footsteps stopped. They were now in a coniferous forest at the foot of Tsang Mountain, and the surroundings were quiet. What's wrong? Ryu asked. Chi Yu closed his eyes and carefully sensed for a while before opening them again. A silver light flashed in his eyes and he said, All kinds of monsters have appeared. They really know how to pick the right time. It seems that Lu Yuan chose to come here today for a reason. I'm afraid that the sacred origin has only appeared in the past 2 days. Now, it's not just the three powerful auras, there are many messy energy auras gathering in Chongming Temple. Looks like there's going to be a good show tonight. Chi Yu carefully identified the auras, and then led Ryue and the other two into action again. Relying on Kirin's aura's keen perception of all kinds of energy auras, he found an empty area and carefully avoided the various energy auras approaching Chongming Temple. Then, he approached the three pagodas. Let's stop here. Chi Yu stopped at a hill, which was about 50 meters above the ground. It was just enough for him to see the general situation inside Chongming Temple. Although it was night, the three pagodas were clearly presented in front of him under the illumination of the stars. The four of them had good eyesight, and they could clearly see the situation inside the temple. It was very quiet inside Chongming Temple, at least on the surface. No one appeared, but the complicated energy auras did not stop for even a moment. Chi Yu simply sat on the ground and silently activated Kirin's thundercloud force. A faint layer of water thundercloud force came out of his body, and with the isolation of the water thundercloud force, he concealed the aura emitted by his body. They observed quietly. They did not have to wait for long before something happened inside Chongming Temple. A milky white light suddenly emerged from the top of Chongming Temple's three pagodas, the main pagoda, Qian Sun Pagoda. The light flashed and lit up Chongming Temple. The moment the milky white light appeared, many panicked figures appeared in some of the dark corners of Chongming Temple and quickly scattered in all directions. Sacred origin! Qiyu exclaimed in a low voice. He could clearly feel that the milky white energy originated from the saint's source. He did not sense the sorrowful aura that Lu Yuan had mentioned, but he could clearly see that within the milky white light emitted by the sacred origin, there was a deathly red. Compared to Lu Yuan's saint energy, this milky white energy was obviously much more massive, especially the fire attribute energy molecules, which were infinitely close to a solid state. The energy was so strong that it was close to a solid state. What kind of level was that? Qiyu immediately tensed up. A few muffled groans could be heard from within Chongming Temple. Clearly, someone had suffered. Suddenly, Qiyu realized that Chongming Temple before him seemed to have changed. It was not just a change in one corner, but the entire Chongming Temple had changed in an instant. A solemn aura emanated from every corner of Chongming Temple. It was an intimidating energy, and the majestic aura spread out like a mountain. Even though Qiyu and the other three were still a distance away from Chongming Temple, they could faintly feel the immense aura. It was definitely not something that a human could emit. At the top of the three pagodas, a milky white light shone at the same time. A loud and clear voice suddenly rang out. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, Chongming Temple is a sacred place of Buddhism, and it will not be tarnished by thieves. Leave this place immediately, or this poor monk will expel you. Ba. The loud and clear voice sounded very deep. It did not seem as domineering as Su Dong's lion's roar, but it sounded like it came from his own mental strength. That intimidating feeling made one feel as if they could not resist it. Ryue said in surprise, "A high monk of Buddhism? I wonder who he is." Qiyu smiled and said, "This is a sacred place of Buddhism, how can there not be a high monk here? What a strong Buddhist energy. However, this Buddhist energy is not as pure and peaceful as Master Zagru's. It seems a little too domineering." Su Dong said, "Don't tell me this high monk is planning to fight against the Covenant of Darkness all by himself." Qiyu chuckled and said, "Brother Su, you're wrong. Although the people from the Covenant of Darkness are nearby, they haven't entered Chongming Temple yet. Those hiding in the shadows just now should be people from the Sun Nation's Soul Eater Hall. Moreover, even if the people from the Covenant of Darkness really came, they might not be able to get away with it. That high monk is not alone. Don't forget that this is the sacred place of Buddhism, Chongming Temple. An ancient temple that has existed for thousands of years naturally has its own special features." At this moment, Qiyu was even more certain of the feeling he had when he first saw the three pagodas. Chongming Temple was indeed not an ordinary place. Under the influence of the coercion, the Sarira bead on Qiyu's wrist emitted a layer of warm light, and the Buddhist energy fluctuated violently. At this moment, Zagru, who was in the hotel, also sensed it at the same time. He woke up from his meditative state and muttered to himself, "Buddhism is of the same origin. We are one family." The black shadows that had scattered in fear only retreated slightly in the face of the tremendous coercion, but they immediately rushed into Chongming Temple against the strong coercion. Buddha is merciful and saves all living beings. Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. A loud Buddhist chant rang out again, and the top of the three pagodas suddenly shone brightly. The white light that was filled with Buddhist energy completely illuminated the entire Chongming Temple, and the black shadows had nowhere to hide. Qiyu could clearly see an old monk in white standing in front of Qian Sun Pagoda. Monks did not need to grow a beard, but from the wrinkles on his face, one could tell that he was very old. The old monk stood there like a towering mountain. Even the majestic Tsang Mountain could not conceal his majestic aura. Standing in front of the Thousand-Seeker Pagoda, his palms were placed together and his eyebrows were lowered. He looked like a towering pine tree. The black shadows quickly approached the old monk from different angles. The long blades in the air carried a lightning-like light, but compared to lightning, these lights were much more sinister. Chi Yu's judgment was correct. These people were from the Sun Nation's Soul Devourer Hall. They were also the first to move out of the various forces. The old monk did not move, still maintaining his original posture. Chi Yu and the other three noticed that as the black shadows pounced on the old monk, their bodies were emitting a thick black aura. However, when the black aura came into contact with the Buddhist light of the three pagodas, it immediately melted like ice and snow. From low to high, the Soul Devourer Hall was divided into 5 ranks: Hunter, Shadow, Assassin, Dark, and Stream. There were more than 20 people in front of them, and the ones charging at the front were at least Assassin and Shadow-level Soul Devourers. However, under the influence of the Buddhist light, their speed was significantly reduced. The standard samurai swords of the Sun Nation were completely black. However, they were not supposed to reflect light, but for some reason, they were emitting a strange glow under the Buddhist light. Right at the front, the 6 soul devourers rushed to the front of the old monk, 6 long swords headed straight for the old monk's bald head with 9 ring scars. The angle of the swords was extremely tricky, almost sealing off all the areas where the old monk could dodge. However, would the old monk dodge? No, he had no intention of dodging from the beginning. Just when the 6 long blades were about a foot away from his head, a golden light burst out instantly. The light suddenly lit up, and the 6 soul devourers screamed at the same time, their bodies flying backward. On the surface, their bodies did not seem to be injured at all. However, a layer of golden light surrounded their bodies that were originally emitting a faint black aura. The Buddhist Dharma is boundless. Repent and you will be saved. As long as you know you are wrong, then it is not too late. There is still a chance. Chi Yu exclaimed, "What a strong Buddhist force! He actually crippled 6 people in an instant." Ryue said, "This old monk's murderous nature is so strong." Chi Yu shook his head and said, "No, he had no intention of killing from the beginning to the end. The knowledge of the 6 soul devourers has been crippled by him. Let me ask, if these guys who live in the dark were baptized by Buddhist energy, what would be the effect?" Su Dong's eyes widened and he said, "Damn, then wouldn't their evil abilities be like the father of a gorilla, crippled baboon?" Chi Yu sneered. "I really don't know what those people from the Soul Devourer Hall are thinking. Their evil abilities are most afraid of pure Buddhist energy. Since they discovered that the sacred source appeared in a Buddhist holy land like the Chongqing Temple, they actually dared to come here and throw away their lives. They must have water in their heads." The Sun Nation's soul devourers reacted immediately after the first attack failed. The soul devourers that were charging forward all stopped in midair, and then quickly retreated out of the temple. The old monk clearly had no intention of giving chase. He just softly chanted a Buddhist mantra, turned around, and walked toward Chien Sun Pagoda. Chi Yu narrowed his eyes and said with a low laugh, "Those guys are afraid, and the people of the Covenant of Darkness are also waiting outside, not daring to enter." Ming Ming said, "They're just unlucky. This Buddhist light is much more powerful than sunlight. Even a high-level vampire would be greatly weakened if bathed in this Buddhist light." Chi Yu's eyes flashed, and he smiled. "All right, since they don't dare to enter, let's go in." Ryue, Su Dong, and Ming Ming looked at him in surprise. Chi Yu said, "Let's go, there's nothing to be surprised about. This is called luring the snake out of its hole. I don't believe that those guys aren't afraid of us getting the sacred source first." Ryu said worriedly, "But, in this way, we will become the target of public criticism." Chi Yu shook his head and said, "If it's just us, of course it won't work, but don't forget, this is Chongqing Temple. If I'm not wrong, the people of the Vatican are also nearby. It's just that they're better at hiding their auras. Looking at the current situation, we have an advantage that the other forces don't have. That is, we belong to Yan Huang, and we're the eastern protectors of Yan Huang. Moreover, we have Master Zagru. With this advantage, the relationship between us and that old monk will only be positive. That old monk has obviously been in Chongqing Temple for many years. I think that no matter how accurate the Pope's astrology is, his understanding of the sacred source can't be more than that old monk's. How can we give up such a good opportunity? As for becoming a target for everyone, I've thought about it. We just need to let those guys outside know that we didn't get anything practical. In this case, at least the Vatican and the Greek protectors won't act rashly. How much trouble can a mere covenant of darkness cause in Chongqing Temple? Ryua nodded and said, "What you said makes sense. However, in this way we'll be completely exposed." Su Dong said, "It's hard to say that we'll be exposed, but I'm afraid that all parties will think that we're involved. Who hasn't seen us? What boss said makes sense. Right now, accurate information is the most important thing for us. Moreover, it's not a bad thing to have a good relationship with that high monk of Chongqing Temple. Let's go." Chi Yu leaped up and took the lead, rushing towards Chongqing Temple at the foot of the hill. Ming Ming, Ryue, and Su Dong followed closely behind. With such a short distance, they arrived at the periphery of Chongqing Temple in a few blinks of an eye. At this time, Chi Yu didn't hide his aura at all, but no one came up to stop him. Whether it was the Covenant of Darkness or the Spirit Devourer Hall, they were all eager for someone to go in and scout the way. With a light leap, Chi Yu was already inside Chongqing Temple. As soon as he entered the range of the temple, the powerful coercion appeared again, or it could be said that the coercion had always been there. For the people of the Spirit Devourer Hall, this might be a huge pressure, but for Chi Yu, this pressure didn't have much impact. As the heir of the bloodline of the King of Divine Beasts, Kirin, even when his strength was still relatively weak, he didn't flinch in the face of the pressure from the patriarchs of the four major clans. How could this pressure affect him now? The sea of bitterness is boundless, repent and you'll be saved. Don't you remember? The old and loud voice sounded again. The Sarira bead on Chi Yu's wrist suddenly lit up. With a flash of light, the fluorescent luster seemed to blend into the surrounding coercion. Chi Yu, who had to rely on his own thundercloud force to resist, suddenly felt his body lighten, and all the pressure was completely gone. The door of Qian Sun Temple opened, and the original coercion suddenly turned into a peaceful aura. Chi Yu saw the old monk again, but this time, the old monk looked much gentler than before. His long white brows moved slightly, and he looked up at Chi Yu. Chi Yu was at the front, so naturally, he was the first to meet the old monk's gaze. He was suddenly stunned, because what he saw was not as simple as a pair of eyes. From the old monk's slightly yellowish gaze, he saw a deep ocean of silence and peace. That feeling of tranquility was because of the aura of the Sarira bead on his hand. The peaceful feeling filled his chest, and the negative effects of cultivating Kirin's ascending cloud technique finally disappeared at this moment. Clasping his hands in front of his chest, Chi Yu said respectfully, "Greetings, Master. I'm really sorry to disturb you so late at night." The old monk's gaze turned from Chi Yu to the Sarira bead on his hand. That yellowish gaze suddenly shot out two beams of light. Although it was just a flash, Chi Yu could clearly feel his Sarira bead heating up. The old monk said indifferently, "Benefactor, you are able to obtain the help of a Buddhist treasure. You are no longer on the same path as those rascals from before. May I know why you are here?" The old monk's voice was not loud, but it had an indescribable deterrent effect on one's mental strength. Chi Yu said, "Our purpose here is to protect everything here. We do not wish for the Buddhist sacred ground of Yen Huang to be polluted." The old monk smiled indifferently and said, "Benefactors, you may leave. All dharmas are empty, and everything is determined by fate." Ming Ming could not help but say, "Master, we are here to help you. There are many bad people here who want to come to the temple to take something." The old monk closed his eyes and said indifferently, "If it is yours, it is yours. If it is not, what is the use of forcing it?" I do not need your help. Although benefactors have good intentions, Chongqing Temple is a sacred ground of Buddhism. It is late, I will not keep you any longer. Qiyu frowned slightly. The old monk in front of him looked a little unreasonable. Ming Ming saw the Sarira bead on his wrist, but did not seem to trust them. Su Dong wanted to say something but was stopped by Qiyu. If that is the case, we will not disturb Master's rest. When Chongqing Temple is in danger, we will definitely not sit back and watch. Let's go. With that, Qiyu turned and walked out. As he turned around, he quietly released his Qilin aura. A faint black and silver light revolved around his body, faintly discernible. Wait a minute. The old monk's voice was a little surprised. Qiyu turned around and looked at the old monk who had opened his eyes again. Master, do you have any more pointers? The old monk looked at Qiyu carefully and said, If I am not wrong, Benefactor seems to have inherited the bloodline of the king of mythical beasts. Qiyu smiled. That is right. I am this generation's Kirin. Facing this monk of unknown age, he did not hide his identity at all. The old monk sighed. 100 years of vicissitudes, Yen Huang has gone through hardships, and Kirin has appeared again. Good, good, good. Benefactors, please follow me. With that, he turned and walked towards Qian Sun Temple. Qiyu hesitated for a moment. His hesitation was not because of the old monk, but because of the people waiting outside. His original plan was to have all discussions with the old monk outside after arriving here. This was to prevent the Covenant of Darkness, the Vatican, or the Greek guardians from thinking that he had obtained the sacred source. However, the old monk had invited them into Qian Sun Pagoda. It would be strange if they did not misunderstand him. However, Qiyu only hesitated for a moment before he followed the old monk into Qian Sun Pagoda. So what if they misunderstood him? He was Kirin. He had inherited the bloodline of the king of mythical beasts. How could he retreat? At that moment, a dark red figure suddenly appeared beside the old monk. A sharp claw instantly grabbed the old monk's neck. As it was too fast, even Qiyu could not react in time. What was even more terrifying was that when the dark red figure appeared, even the Buddhist qi around the old monk's body was pushed away. The air within a 10-meter radius seemed to have frozen, and a strong evil aura tainted the originally pure Chongming Temple. The blood-red eyes were filled with a terrifying aura. Watch out! Qiyu shouted. His body moved casually and his right hand reached out with all his might. A purple lightning suddenly flashed towards the claw. However, he was a step too slow. When he reached out, the claw had already reached the edge of the old monk's neck. However, he was still a step too slow. When he reached out, the claw had already reached the edge of the old monk's neck. The old monk did not panic. The golden light that he used to deal with the Soul Devourer Hall appeared again and collided with the claw. The claw came and retreated quickly. With a flash of golden light, the dark red figure had already retreated 20 meters away, just in time to avoid Qiyu's attack. Qiyu was afraid that the lightning he released would destroy Qian Sun Pagoda. He quickly controlled his thundercloud force to make the lightning disappear. The old monk's body swayed slightly. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He turned his head and the Buddha Qi around his body instantly became fierce. Clearly, the old monk was enraged by the sneak attack. The one who suddenly attacked the old monk was the vampire prince of the Covenant of Darkness, Klinsman. His surprise was no less than that of the old monk. Although he did not use his full strength because he did not want to kill the old monk, he was a vampire prince and it was a sneak attack. He was confident that he would succeed. He had even calculated the Buddhist power around the old monk's body. But he did not expect that he would still fail. When his claw collided with the golden light emitted from the old monk, Klinsman clearly felt that he was not attacking the old monk alone, but the entire Chongming Temple. In that instant, it was as though the entire temple had become the old monk's defense, which was how his attack was neutralized. Ming Ming and Ryue pounced at the same time. Ming Ming's seven-colored thundercloud force and Ryue's Tyrannosaurus thundercloud force covered Klinsmann like a huge net. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Qiyu had been thinking about Su Qing. He did not want to let Klinsmann go when he saw him again. In a flash, he appeared on the other side of Klinsmann and used his Kirin's aura to cover his body. Although Klinsmann had always been arrogant, it did not mean that he was arrogant enough to think that he could deal with the three strongest Zodiac Guardian warriors at the same time. Seeing that Ming Ming and Ryue had surrounded him, he immediately teleported and disappeared on the spot. It was teleportation again. Qiyu felt that he had lost his target on Klinsmann. He had to admit that the Vampire Prince's teleportation was a very annoying ability. Prajna Paramitha is the great divine mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the supreme mantra. It can eliminate all suffering and is real. Therefore, the Prajna Paramitha is the mantra. Seal. The old and sonorous chanting of the incantation was heard. The Buddha's light that had dimmed earlier appeared again. This time, the light emitted from the top of the three pagodas was even more intense. The Buddha's light shone on every corner of Chongming Temple, leaving no trace behind. Klinsmann grunted. His body appeared 10 meters away from the old monk. He was shocked to find that his teleportation ability had disappeared in an instant. Before he could do anything else, an invisible energy had already enveloped his body. Qiyu's shoulders shook slightly. Although his speed was not as fast as a vampire's teleportation ability, it was definitely not slow. He had broken through the four-cloud realm. Under the effect of the thundercloud force, his movement speed had increased. In a flash, he appeared in front of Klinsmann and swung his right fist at Klinsmann's chest. At his current speed and energy level, techniques were no longer important. Under the influence of the Buddha Chi, not only did Klinsmann lose his ability to teleport, but his speed had also become much slower. By the time Qiyu arrived in front of him, Klinsmann had no time to dodge. He raised his claws to block Qiyu's fist. Silver and black lights flashed for a moment. Qiyu's eyes turned as black as ink, and his hair turned silver. The energy of Kirin's arm exploded instantly. Klinsmann grunted again. With the force of Qiyu's punch, his body flew backward. His face became even paler. Ming Ming, Ryue, and Su Dong jumped up almost at the same time. They intercepted Klinsmann from 3 different directions. Without teleportation, it was impossible for Klinsmann to escape from the siege of the 4 Zodiac Guardian warriors. However, Klinsmann was not alone. 5 black lights enveloped Klinsmann's body in an instant. The surrounding Buddha aura was forced back for a moment. Klinsmann's body flashed. Without the influence of the Buddha aura, he immediately used teleportation. When he appeared again, he was almost at the top of Chongming Temple's wall. Chapter 87. Klinsmann stood on the wall and glared at Qiyu. His eyes glowed coldly. His body flashed and disappeared into the darkness. Qiyu did not chase after him. What a joke! Klinsmann had the ability to teleport away from Chongming Temple. Even if he chased after him, he would not be able to catch up. Moreover, the people from the Covenant of Darkness might be lying in ambush outside the temple. Taking a few steps forward, Qiyu came to the old monk and asked with concern, "Master, are you all right?" The old monk shook his head. "It is indeed an aura from the west. No wonder you would appear. Come." As he spoke, he led Qiyu and the other 3 into the 1,000 Search Tower. What surprised Qiyu was that the Vatican and the Greek Guardian did not appear in this situation. Putting the Greek Guardian aside, he and the Vatican were currently in a cooperative relationship. Were they not afraid that he would get the holy source first? On the surface, if he was a member of the Vatican, he would definitely ask to enter the 1,000 Search Tower as soon as he saw this situation. Thinking about it, Qiyu and the other 3 followed the old monk into the 1,000 Search Tower. The first floor of the 1,000 Search Tower was very spacious but also very simple. It did not have the holy aura of the outside. It even looked a little rundown. There was only a large bed, a wooden table, and a few chairs in the tower. The old monk wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Have a seat." Chi Yu's eyes swept around and landed on the old monk again. "Master, have you been living here all this time? I asked around before coming here. The 3 pagodas are considered tourist destinations. Aren't you afraid of being disturbed by practicing in a place like this?" The old monk smiled. "Ordinary people are not allowed to enter the Thousand Search Tower. I've been here for a few years. Why not practice Buddhism? Why would I leave?" "Chi Yu, how are your injuries? The one who ambushed you just now was a vampire prince from the Covenant of Darkness. His abilities are not weak." The old monk shook his head. "His aura has completely sunk into darkness. Although he can use his aura to injure me in a collision, his dark energy has no effect on me. You don't have to worry. Besides, life is not essential to me." "Chi Yu, has Reverend been guarding Chongming Temple all this time?" The old monk smiled calmly. "I came here when I was 22, he said. "It's been more than 100 years, but I can't remember the exact year. Although this place used to be isolated from news, I could still hear some news of Yan Huang becoming stronger. This was very gratifying to me. The country doesn't need us to do anything. I can stay here and protect this pure land." Su Dong said in shock. "Over 100 years? Doesn't that mean Master is over 100 years old?" The old monk said, "I didn't expect that after spending more than 100 years here in peace, I would have to face another battle. Chongming Temple was the core of this battle. If it's possible, I hope that all of you can help me protect the pure land of Chongming Temple. Don't let those external evils destroy it." "It's my duty," Chi Yu said resolutely. Although he was once a hooligan, a ruffian. But the Yan Huang Republic was his motherland. If external enemies wanted to destroy everything in his motherland, how could he sit back and watch? Although he knew that the goal this time was the divine origin, when the old monk calmly made his request, he agreed without hesitation. Rue, Ming Ming and Su Dong all nodded. Their thoughts were the same as Chi Yu's. As the guardians of the East, if they couldn't even protect the holy land of their motherland, then what kind of guardians were they? The old monk showed a rare smile. "If the previous generation of Zodiac guardians were as strong as you, perhaps our motherland wouldn't have to go through so many hardships." Thinking of the old monk's age of more than 100 years, Chi Yu had a thought. "Reverend, have you seen the previous generation of Zodiac guardian warriors?" The old monk sighs and nods his head lightly. "That was a very long time ago. But I still can't forget everything. Perhaps you didn't know that I was the previous generation of Zodiac guardian warriors, Tianyin." "Ah!" the 4 of them exclaimed at the same time. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. The old monk smiled. "Is it strange? You don't need to think too much. I'm not from Tibet. To be precise, the previous generations of Tianyin and the Zodiac Guardian warriors have their own uncertainties. That year, the previous generation of Kirin died in the hands of his fellow Yan Huang compatriots due to special circumstances. I knew that everything was irreversible. Disheartened, I fought with all my might but to no avail. In the end, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors sacrificed their lives for the country. Only I, who was still very young at that time, returned to Chongming Temple after losing all hope to Buddhism. Buddha has blessed us. Perhaps Buddha has seen everything that the Zodiac Guardian God warriors have done. Our Yan Huang nation has once again stood among the nations of the world and become strong again. Seeing all this, I can't imagine how happy I am. But I understood that no matter how strong the country was, it still needed the protection of the Eastern Guardian in the dark. And I also predicted that in the near future, no matter if it was our country or the world, there would be a calamity. In order not to repeat the same mistakes, I began a long search. Perhaps you didn't know, but the previous generations of Tianyin were all chosen by the previous generation's Tianyin. Chi Yu was pleasantly surprised. Then you know Reverend Zagru? The old monk smiled and shook his head. No, I don't know him. Back then, when he was born, I found his master. After many years of searching and exploration, I finally found his master. After many years of searching and exploration, I finally realized how important Tian was to the Zodiac Guardian warriors. After many years of searching and exploration, a powerful Tian played a vital role in the Zodiac Guardian warriors' cultivation. Therefore, I taught this mission to his master. As a Buddhist sect, there have been many eminent monks in Tibet. From the foundation of Buddhism, they are the best choice for the next generation's Tian. Therefore, after I passed on my mission, I returned to Chongming Temple. Everything was as I predicted. The new generation of Zodiac Guardian warriors has finally appeared. Looking at all of you valiant and heroic, you all have greater potential than the previous generation's Zodiac Guardian warriors. I am very gratified. Chi-Yu said, Then why did you let us go previously? I think you should have discovered our identities when you saw us just now. After all, you were the previous generation's Tian. The old monk sighed and said, I have already sensed what all of you can feel. Dali is no longer peaceful. I also know why they are here. The enemy is too strong. I don't want to implicate anyone. I think the Zodiac Guardian warriors are not completely gathered now. I don't want any harm to come to you. Later on, I discovered Ink Kirin's aura and powerful energy waves on you. Only then can I be sure that you have the strength to help me. If it wasn't for the Pure Land of Chongming Temple, I really don't want you to participate in this. Chi-Yu furrowed his brows. Reverend, we are the guardians of the East. It is our responsibility to protect the East. Why do you say that? The old monk's eyes revealed the sorrow of death. Perhaps it's because we suffered too much in the past. When the Zodiac Guardian God warriors become truly strong, they would become the strongest existence in the world. However, before you truly grow up, you are still relatively weak. It's not that I don't want you to protect the East, nor am I doubting your determination to protect the East. But I don't want you to make unnecessary sacrifices. When necessary, give up some things and bear with it. When you are confident, then carry out your mission. That is the best choice. Looking at the old monk, Chi-Yu recalled what Zagru had said to him in the past. At the same time, he was more and more interested in the strength of the Zodiac Guardian warriors when they were all gathered. According to the two previous sky guides, once all the Zodiac Guardian warriors were gathered, there seemed to be a qualitative leap in strength. I'm sorry, Reverend. I misunderstood you. Let's get back to the topic. Initially, we didn't know why those Westerners and people from the Sun Nation came to Yanhuang. After much investigation, we finally got the news. So they are here for something called the Sacred Source. What is it? To those Westerners, is it really that useful? The old monk nodded and said, Their judgment is correct. The sacred source that they speak of is actually a living relic. Chi-Yu's body shook. Living relic? But as far as I know, a living relic is not an attractive energy. This time, it was the old monk's turn to be shocked. Could it be that you have seen a living relic before? Chi-Yu nodded. Reverend Zagru himself has a living relic. I have heard him mention it before. It is a Buddhist treasure that requires 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power to cultivate. Its Buddhist power is immense. The old monk's eyes revealed a look of joy. Seems like my choice was right. Back then, I judged that the baby had great potential. Indeed, he finally gave birth to a living relic that truly belongs to our Buddhist sect. Chi-Yu was a little confused. Reverend, can you explain it more clearly? I don't quite understand. The old monk said, The living relic in Chongming Temple is different from the ones you have seen. From the perspective of Buddhism, a relic refers to a Buddhist treasure left behind by an eminent monk after his death. Just like the relic bracelet in your hand. It is a Buddhist treasure left behind by 10 generations of eminent monks in Tibet. However, following the development of Buddhism, the chances of a relic appearing has gradually increased. The Buddhist power contained within it is also divided into different levels. As for a living relic, it is the highest existence among the relic. Not only does it require 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power, but it also requires a person born with Buddhist roots to be able to cultivate and integrate the 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power. However, this is not the only chance for a living relic to form. There is another situation where a living relic can be cultivated. Another situation? What is that? From what you said, this living relic in Chong Ming Temple seems to be very different from Reverend Zagru's relic. The old monk nodded. That's right. There is an essential difference. To be precise, this living relic in Chong Ming Temple does not belong to our Buddhist sect. You should have heard Zagru talk about the ancient beasts. At that time, the East was ruled by the ancient divine beasts and ancient ferocious beasts. When some 10,000-year-old divine beasts or ferocious beasts die, they will leave behind a NEI pill. If they are strong enough, the NEI pill can turn into a solid form. Its texture is like our relic. We call it a giant beast relic. The probability of such a giant beast relic appearing is much lower than the relic of our eminent monk. Regardless of whether it is a ferocious beast or a divine beast, for a giant beast relic to appear after their death, they must have a very kind heart. At the same time, they must accumulate thousands of good deeds to have a chance of success. All of those must be good deeds that come from the heart. Chi Yu asked, "Then what is the use of this giant beast relic?" The old monk said, "A giant beast relic is the accumulation of all the energy essence of a dead giant beast. Although the energy will undergo some qualitative changes after forming a giant beast relic, even after the changes, the energy contained in the giant beast relic is still similar to our Buddhist relic. This is also the reason why we call it a relic. This is because the energy of these ancient beasts is much stronger than that of humans. Therefore, the energy contained in a giant beast relic is naturally greater than that of our Buddhist relic. Among these giant beast relic, the most precious is the creation of a living giant beast. Living giant beast relic has only appeared twice in history. Those 2 times they helped 2 of your ancestors, the Kirin clan. The Kirin clan is also the only ancient giant beast that has formed a living giant beast relic. Ah, living giant beast relic belongs to the Kirin clan? Chi Yu's mouth opened wide in shock. The old monk smiled faintly and said, "Although in theory, any ancient giant beast can form a giant beast relic, it is indeed too difficult. The cost of forming a 10,000-year-old giant beast is already very difficult. It is even more difficult to have thousands of good deeds. Therefore, the formation of a giant beast relic is already very difficult. The formation of a living giant beast relic is 10 times more difficult than a giant beast relic. Only the Kirin clan can have it. There are 3 main prerequisites for a living giant beast relic to appear. First, the formation of a living giant beast relic is not something that can be done by a divine beast or a ferocious beast alone. Only when a divine beast and a ferocious beast form a pair of husband and wife, and they are completely in love with each other and pay the price of their lives for each other. This condition is already very difficult. It is not that there are no divine beasts and ferocious beasts, but the chances are too low. Only the romantic Kirin clan can attract the ferocious beasts' liking and make them fall in love with each other. The second condition is that at least one of the husband and wife has to reach the psychic realm. You can understand it as another realm above the 10,000-year-old giant beast. In the entire ancient giant beast era, the number of giant beasts that can reach the psychic realm will not exceed 2-digit. F***ck. With this kind of probability, there is almost no chance of this living giant beast relic appearing. Chi wanted to say F***ck, but he was too embarrassed to say it in front of the old monk. The old monk smiled faintly and said, "The last condition is the most difficult. In order to form a living giant beast relic, it can only appear when the male of the couple dies and the female happens to be pregnant. The living giant beast relic is the child that the female is pregnant with. Let me ask you, even if the first two situations occur, who would be willing to let their child become a living giant beast relic? You must know that a living giant beast relic can inherit 70% of the couple's combined energy, but it cannot use it. It can only be used by others. No one doesn't want to obtain a living giant beast relic. No parent would want to see their child become the target of public criticism. Therefore, the formation of a living giant beast relic can only be a coincidence. Therefore, in the long ancient giant beast era, it did not appear many times. Chi Yu and the other three were silent. After hearing the old monk's words, they could totally imagine the huge price that the divine beast and ferocious beast couple had to pay to form such a living giant beast relic. It was not as simple as pain. Chi Yu clenched his right fist and said, "Master, according to what you said, this living giant beast relic is actually an ancient giant beast?" The old monk nodded and said, "That's right. That's right." Chi Yu continued to ask, "If one wants to obtain the energy in the living giant beast relic, what is the outcome of this ancient giant beast?" The old monk sighed and said, "If it is a passive absorption, then there is only one outcome, which is death. However, in history, the Kirin clan has always been active absorption because it is the Kirin clan that forms a living giant beast relic. When a living giant beast relic is willing to offer itself, although it will not die, its physical body will disappear completely. Only its soul will be connected to the owner who obtains its energy and become a part of the life of the person who absorbs it." Ming Ming's eyes were filled with tears. In that case, this ancient giant beast child that became a living giant beast relic is even more pitiful than its parent. From the day it was born, it was ready to become the target of others' energy absorption. Regardless of whether it is active or passive, it cannot truly exist. Chi Yu said, "Master, is the Kirin clan really so cruel? Do they want to absorb the energy of their own kind to make themselves stronger?" The old monk shook his head gently and said, "No, of course not. As the king of the divine beasts, Kirin only has kindness in his heart. Why would he do such a thing? In history, the two absorptions were completed under special circumstances, and they were the same situation. I can only say that the two most famous kings of the Kirin clan during the era of the ancient giant beasts did not wish to obtain the energy of the living giant beast relic. However, in the end, due to a freak combination of factors, it still helped them. As for this young lady's question, I am unable to answer it. I have only heard about the situation of the living giant beast relic fusing with its host. As for the actual situation, not only do I not know, no one in this world knows. However, I have once thought that if the host's strength is strong enough, he might be able to use the solidification of energy to condense a new body for the living giant beast relic. After all, everything in this world can be measured by energy." Ryua held up Ming Ming's hand and said, "What a pitiful living giant beast relic. No matter what, we cannot let those Westerners get it. Don't worry, Master, we will definitely do our best to protect it." The old monk let out a long sigh and said, "I don't know why, but I always feel that the appearance of the living giant beast relic has its own destiny. It is not something that can be controlled by humans. This penniless monk will thank you on its behalf for your kind intentions. It is now cultivating on the highest floor of the pagoda. Every year at this time, it is the period when its energy is the most unstable. It needs to cultivate for a period of time to recover." Chi Yu was moved and said, "Master, can that living giant beast relic have its own strength?" The old monk nodded and said, "Although the living giant beast relic is extremely pitiful, it has its own merits. Its long lifespan is one of them. As long as no one absorbs the energy it possesses, then it could continue to live, unaffected by the passage of time. As for cultivation, although it can possess a certain level of strength, no matter how hard it works, in the end, its strength can only be about 30% of the strength of the stronger parent. Generally speaking, it is the strength of Kirin's side. At its peak, 30% of Kirin's strength is not weak. However, it is too difficult to cultivate the living giant beast relic. After all, it only has 50% of Kirin's bloodline. 50%. That was his own compatriot. With a bloodline similar to his, Chi Yu's heart was beating faster and the blood in his body was boiling. After talking to the old monk, he knew that his purpose of coming here had completely changed. At this time, no matter what, he could no longer think of destroying the living giant beast relic. At this moment, Chi Yu suddenly had a thought and said in surprise, "Why is Master Zagru and the rest here? Oh no, there are so many enemies outside. Let's go out and help them." After saying that, he did not even have the time to apologize to the old monk. He immediately rushed out of the Qian Sun pagoda. Chi Yu was very familiar with Zagru's aura. Heaven's guidance and Kirin were inseparable. As soon as he left the Qian Sun pagoda, he sensed that Zagru and the other Zodiac guardian warriors were already surrounded. All sorts of lights flashed outside Chongming Temple. Clearly, they had already started fighting. Chi Yu looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His eyes shone brightly and he put his hands together in front of his chest. Black and silver lights shot up into the sky. A huge shadow of Kirin with a surging energy aura caused heaven and earth to change. Chi Yu stepped on a four-colored cloud and soared into the sky. His body quickly completed the true form mutation in the air. Under the black Kirin armor, the Kirin bead on his chest released a dazzling light and the Kirin on his back enveloped his body. Silver light swirled around his right arm. Like a meteor chasing the moon, he rushed towards the center of the battle outside. His body was in the air. Chi Yu could already see Zagru leading Vol, Yan Xiaoi, Hu Guang, Ian, Guan Ping, and Modi. They were surrounded by a large group of men in black. Among these men in black, all the experts of the Covenant of Darkness were present. Wolf King Garnet, Bear King Baslu, Vampire Prince Klinsman, and their subordinate. Apart from the experts of the Covenant of Darkness, the people of Soul Devourer Hall were also lying in wait. They seemed to have reached a tacit agreement with the Covenant of Darkness. All of them were hiding in the dark aura, ready to strike at any time. On the ground, several demon wolfmen were screaming miserably. From the green smoke rising from their bodies, it was obvious that they had been poisoned by Hu Guang's snake venom. Perhaps because of the overbearing snake venom, all the experts of the Covenant of Darkness, except for the raging bearmen who did not participate in the battle, were frantically attacking Zagru's group of 7 in the form of energy under the leadership of the 3 Kings of Darkness. Obviously, they wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Zodiac Guardian warriors had not gathered together to annihilate them. On the side of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Modi, Guan Ping, Hu Guang, and Ian had completed their own Zodiac transformation. This was the first time Chi Yu had seen Hu Guang and Ian after their transformation. Hu Guang's body was covered in a layer of dark green scales. His body had become much more slender than before. He was constantly moving at high speed, weaving between the energy of the enemy's attacks. But because the enemy's attacks were too concentrated, the huge dark energy was full of oppressive pressure, making it difficult for him to use his snake venom. On the other hand, Ian's Zodiac transformation was more special. Just as Hu Guang had said, after completing the transformation, a large part of his head was bald, and a layer of black and white hair appeared on his body. Whether it was Hu Guang or Ian, they were not strong fighters among the Zodiac Guardian warriors. At this time, they could only rely on their dexterity and speed to deal with the enemy. To Chi Yu's surprise, not only Modi and Guan Ping were at the forefront, but Yan Xiaoi was also there. At this time, Xiaoi's body was emitting a layer of gray light. His body was constantly advancing and retreating, and every time he rushed forward, he would bring out a stream of gray energy. The effect of the energy was very strange, it could actually offset part of the dark energy. Vol was guarding beside Zagru. His chubby hands turned into a sky full of palm shadows, dissolving the dark energy that seeped in one by one. Among the current Zodiac Guardian warriors, the strongest were obviously Qi Yu and the other three who had entered Chongming Temple first. If it was only Vol and the other five, it would be impossible for them to resist the crazy attack of the Covenant of Darkness powerhouses. However, there was another person among them, and that was Zagru. Standing in the middle of the 6 Zodiac Guardian warriors, Zagru put his palms together in front of his chest, chanting something in a low voice. Circles of white light constantly emitted from his body. The milky white light looked so gentle, and each circle of light could take away a large amount of dark energy launched by the Covenant of Darkness. It was like the dark energy that was washed away by the Buddha's light in Chongming Temple. The strength of Zagru's Buddha's power was so strong that even the old monk in Chongming Temple could not compare to it. He had inherited the Buddha's power of 10 lives, and although his Dharma might not have reached the realm of an eminent monk, his Buddha's power was absolutely strong. Therefore, although the Zodiac Guardian warriors were at an absolute disadvantage, it seemed impossible for the people of the Dark Parliament to break through their defense. Obviously, Zagru contributed the most in resisting the enemy's attack, followed by Hu Guang. If it were not for Hu Guang's poison, the enemy would have launched a strong attack. Qi Yu's long roar made all the Zodiac Guardian warriors feel refreshed. The light emitted by Zagru changed slightly, and 6 beams of white light entered the bodies of the 6 Zodiac Guardian warriors, increasing their energy by more than 30%. Because Modi's legs were so fast, it was as if a barrier had appeared in front of him, and he immediately kicked back several devil Ronin who could not resist in time. Guan Ping's performance was even more obvious. His solid muscles swelled up a little, and he stepped back slightly. He put his hands together in front of him, and a golden egg of light suddenly appeared. It collided with the dark red light emitted by Vampire Prince Klinsman in the air, causing a rain of light to fall all over the sky. Guan Ping's strength was obviously not as good as Klinsman's, but with Zagru's continuous Buddha's power, Klinsman's strength was greatly reduced, and this time they were evenly matched. Klinsman shouted, "Soul Eater of the Sun Nation, are you looking at a painting? What are you waiting for?" With a sharp roar, the Soul Eater who were hidden in the surroundings quickly moved. In fact, it was not that they did not want to cooperate with the Covenant of Darkness to launch an attack, but the Buddha's power emitted by Zagru was their greatest enemy. Previously in Chongming Temple, they had already lost 6 masters. However, in this situation, they also understood that if Qi Yu joined the battle, their chances would be even slimmer. Therefore, they had no choice but to move. Klinsman pointed his right hand at Qi Yu in the air and shouted, "Baslu, take your people and stop them." Although Qi Yu was the first to rush out of Chongming Temple, Ryue and the others were not slow either. At this time, they had also risen into the air and followed closely behind Qi Yu. The Berserk Bearmen, who had not joined the battle earlier, instantly entered a berserk state when Baslu the Bear King roared. Their huge bodies gathered together like a huge wall. Baslu the Bear King roared at Qi Yu in a provocative manner and swung his fist through the air. A ball of highly condensed energy rushed directly towards Qi Yu. Qi Yu snorted coldly and said, "Leave these big guys to me. You guys go and assist Grandmaster and the others." His flying body descended in an instant. At this time, however, the first thing that Qi Yu attacked was not the Bear King or his Berserk Bearmen. Kiran's 100 lightning strikes. The black and silver light around his body suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a strong purple light filled with a strong repulsive force. Unexpectedly, it forcibly deflected the Bear King's attack to one side. Within the purple light, Qi Yu's body constantly flashed with strong electric light. A black cloud condensed above his head. A purple beam of light about 1/2 meter in diameter soared into the sky and merged with the black cloud. The black cloud was immediately surrounded by electric light and the energy aura became extremely unstable. Chapter 88. Baslu the Bear King had a look of disdain on his face. With a wave of his right hand, all the berserk bearmen squatted down almost at the same time and covered their heads with their hands. A layer of keratin-like energy condensed on the surface of their skin. Needless to say, it was insulating. Not only were these berserk bearmen extremely strong in combat, they were even more frightening in terms of their defensive capabilities. Apart from being slightly afraid of Hu Guang's poison, they were not afraid of any other attacks. Basla's reaction could not be said to be slow, but it was a pity that his plan failed. Over 100 bolts of purple lightning, as thick as an arm, instantly erupted amidst the rolling thunder. Chi Yu had now fully entered the four-cloud realm, and his thundercloud force had even reached the cloudless level. This time, his Kirin's 100 lightning strikes could not be compared to the past. Not only was the strength of the energy clearly increased by several times, but at the same time, the twisting bolts of lightning, as if they had eyes, accurately captured the location of their targets. Chi Yu's targets were very simple. They were the Spirit Devourers from the Spirit Devourer Hall who had just pounced on the Zodiac Guardian warriors. If they were members of the Covenant of Darkness, perhaps they could rely on their darkness ability to resist for a while. However, the Spirit Devourers, who were also evil but were much weaker, were not so lucky. The bolts of lightning that were as thick as an arm accurately found their targets like homing missiles. For a moment, not even a scream could be heard. The entire area outside Chongming Temple immediately lit up with intense purple lightning. Amidst the lightning, a burning smell assailed the nostrils, and the Spirit Devourers fell one by one in the lightning, clearly becoming charred charcoal. With the help of Ryue and the others, the Zodiac Guardian warriors surrounding Zagru immediately felt much more at ease. Little E gave Chi Yu a thumbs up. "Boss, you're strong. I finally know how to cultivate a human penis." Although Chi Yu had dealt with the Spirit Devourer Hall's attack, as soon as he landed on the ground, he was immediately surrounded by the berserk bearmen who had reacted. Their huge bodies surrounded him tightly, and dozens of fists the size of a face smashed towards Chi Yu. Chi Yu snorted coldly. He knew that the bearmen in front of him had extremely strong defenses, but that did not mean that they were flawless. Time to roast the bear paws. The thundercloud force around him rapidly transformed into thundercloud force. 2 blinding flames lit up Chi Yu's hands. His upper body leaned backwards, and he dodged 2 huge fists. At the same time, he made a circle with his hands, and Kirin true fire of Kirin. Screams came from the mouths of the bearmen at almost the same time. Chi Yu stomped his right foot on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Fiery hell. With a boom, surging flames rose instantly, spreading out from almost every crack. In an instant, the 8 berserk bearmen were engulfed in flames. Among these bearmen, a few had been poisoned last time. Under the stimulation of the flames, the poison on their bodies that had not yet fully healed acted up again. Although the attack power of the berserk bearmen was strong, their biggest weakness was that they were not clear-headed enough. The sudden intense burning pain immediately triggered their inauspicious stars, and they no longer had any control over themselves. When Chi Yu was still at 3 clouds, if he continuously used Kirin's 100 lightning strikes and Kirin's fiery hell, it would be a huge test for his thundercloud force. However, now that he was at 4 clouds, his overall thundercloud force had risen to another level. More importantly, after practicing Kirin's ascending cloud technique, his thundercloud force's recovery speed was much faster than before. As soon as he used fiery hell, his right fist immediately turned into a black and silver light. He heavily punched the chest of a berserk bearman in front of him. Under the bombardment of Kirin's arm, the 4-meter-tall berserk bearman was immediately sent flying. Seizing this opportunity, Chi Yu flashed out of the encirclement. His body was burning with flames, and he directly pounced on the vampire Prince Klinsman, who was constantly using his dark ability. Klinsman was extremely angry at this time, but Zagru's Buddhist energy was his greatest nemesis. He could not do anything to the Zodiac Guardian warrior. Seeing that Chi Yu was pouncing on him, Klinsmann's anger suddenly surged. His eyes became bloodshot and he spread his wings. The blood-red light was like a rhythmic wave. This time, he did not use teleportation, but rushed towards Chi-Yu. Kirin, don't use my mystic steps. Klinsmann did not retreat, and neither did Chi-Yu. He hated Klinsmann's teleportation ability to leave the battlefield at any time. Since Klinsmann had chosen to fight head-on, it was a good opportunity for him to test the strength of the four clouds. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. The four colors of the Kirin pearl on the chest of the Kirin armor suddenly separated, and the four colors rushed out of the pearl at the same time. A strange scene appeared. Four shadows rushed out of the black Kirin armor at the same time. They were purple, blue, red, and green. They were four shadows of Chi-Yu. The four shadows gathered at the same time, and four different types of thundercloud force burst out. With the increase of thundercloud force, Chi-Yu had better control of his Kirin skills. However, Klinsmann was indeed a super vampire closest to the Blood Emperor level. In the face of this strange attack, he let out a sharp howl, and the red light around his body instantly turned gold. His body turned nimbly in the air, and he abruptly stopped his forward momentum. Sharp claws shone around his body, and at the tip of the claws, a 1-meter-long golden light met the four shadows of Kirin almost at the same time. Lin Chi-Yu, who was controlling his thundercloud force with all his strength, opened his eyes wide. In just a moment, the four shadows actually became more solid. Thunder, fire, wind, and water, the effect of four kinds of energy combining, was definitely not as simple as 1 + 1. Among all of Kirin's abilities, the four magic clouds of Kirin had never been seen before. However, ever since Chi-Yu reached the 3 clouds level, he had been thinking about how to combine the four thundercloud force. When the four shadows got close to Klinsmann, the thundercloud force and thundercloud force suddenly stopped, and the thundercloud force and water thundercloud force instantly accelerated. As long as it wasn't pure water, it could conduct electricity, let alone Chi-Yu's water thundercloud force, which was full of energy. The thundercloud force became the main attack, while the water thundercloud force played a role in amplification. These two thundercloud force were Chi-Yu's strongest, and they had both reached the 5 clouds level. In the dense thunder and lightning in the sky, Klinsmann roared. The golden light emitted by his body was completely suppressed by the thundercloud force and water thundercloud force. At this moment, the stopped wind thundercloud force and fire thundercloud force overlapped in the air. The fire borrowed the power of the wind, and the fire thundercloud force instantly doubled in size. Klinsmann groaned in his heart. Facing Chi-Yu's attack, he realized that this young man was much stronger than the last time they met. He didn't care about Chi-Yu's attack skills. No creature could be more sensitive than a bat. What surprised him was the strength of Chi-Yu's energy. The last time they met, Chi-Yu was obviously not as strong as him, but this time, the strength of his energy had completely suppressed his darkness supernatural ability. The golden light around his body was a manifestation of the extreme joy of practicing the darkness supernatural ability to the extreme. If he wanted to absorb the behemoth's relic, he needed to rely on this mutated ability. After the mutation, the energy in Klinsmann's body would lose all the darkness aura. The energy situation was similar to the holy power of the Vatican, which could instantly increase his strength to the extreme. However, using this ability consumed a lot of his own energy. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In his opinion, although Chi-Yu was very strong, he would be able to destroy him as long as he used this unique skill. However, when he collided with the water thundercloud force, which had been amplified by the thundercloud force, he realized that he had underestimated Chi-Yu. Under the crazy bombardment of the thundercloud force, Klinsmann's energy was forcibly blocked. At the same time, the feeling of numbness caused Klinsmann's speed to significantly slow down. What was more frightening was that the lightning energy was constantly bombarding his body like a great river. The explosive energy posed a great threat to him. At this time, it was difficult for Klinsmann to rely on teleportation because the energy in his body had been absorbed by Chi Yu's thundercloud force. He could only use his ability again if he broke free or offset the thundercloud force in front of him. Chi Yu's mind was completely focused on controlling the thundercloud force. After his own thundercloud force became stronger, he felt like a fish in water when controlling the thundercloud force. Bing! Under the amplification of Kirin's 9 syllables, the thundercloud force besieging Klinsmann was strengthened again. Klinsmann grunted, and the darkness special ability in his body finally broke out under the strong stimulation. At this time, he no longer cared whether he was injured or not. Countless blood threads shot out from his body, forming a large web-like cocoon that enveloped his body. In the flashing light, Klinsmann roared, and all the blood in his body boiled. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Finally, he rushed out of the electric net before Chi Yu could amplify it again. However, before Klinsmann could catch his breath, the flame phantom with the amplification of the wind thundercloud force and the intense Kirin's true fire had already covered his body. Klinsmann screamed, and the blood light around his body weakened significantly. Although the fire thundercloud force and the wind thundercloud force were not comparable to the thundercloud force and the water thundercloud force, Klinsmann was still not in his best state. However, Klinsmann was not in his best condition. He was injured and panicked under the attack of the Qilin true fire. This time, Chi Yu did not intend to give Klinsmann another chance. In fact, even he did not expect that he could trap Klinsmann with the attack of Kirin's "Don't Use Mystifying Step." Lin Bing Doge. Chi Yu, who was behind the 4 clouds, could already use the Buddhist incantation of 9 words to amplify his power 4 times. The original red Kirin's true fire turned a faint blue under the 4-fold amplification. On the surface, the temperature of the flame had disappeared. However, only Klinsmann, who was deep inside the flame, knew that the Kirin's true fire had changed from an open flame to a yin flame. The energy in his body was greatly reduced under the effect of the true fire, and the wings on his back had a burnt smell. Just when Chi Yu thought that he could defeat Klinsmann, he suddenly felt the arrival of danger. Although Klinsmann was completely in danger, Chi Yu did not intend to kill him. It was not because Chi Yu was soft-hearted, but because Chi Yu wanted to find Su Qing's whereabouts from him. Kirin's Don't Use Mystifying Steps originally consumed a small amount of thundercloud force from Chi Yu, but under his deliberate control and amplification, it now consumed a large amount of his thundercloud force and mental strength. As a result, Chi Yu's body was currently extremely weak. The sudden crisis appeared on both sides of Chi Yu at the same time. It was 2 extremely sharp energies. With his sharp sense of Kirin's aura, Chi Yu clearly found that the 2 energies were full of evil aura. Although the intensity of the energy was far less than that of Klinsmann, the energy was very concentrated, just like when he faced the scorpion needle attack of Soso, the guardian of the Scorpio constellation. At this time, although the other Zodiac Guardian warriors had stabilized the situation, the members of the Covenant of Darkness were all strong. It would not be easy for them to win. Moreover, no one noticed that Chi Yu had been attacked. In this situation, although Chi Yu was shocked, he did not panic. He shouted, "Kirin Red!" With a shout, surging flames instantly burned on Chi Yu's body. The fiery red Kirin Red superimposed on the black Kirin armor. A huge energy aura immediately spread out. Chi Yu clearly saw 2 faint black shadows appear on both sides of his body at the same time. The moment he summoned Kirin Red, the 2 needle-like energies had already attacked his body. It was not simple darkness, it was full of evil aura. When the aura came into contact with Kirin Red, the flames on Kirin Red immediately became stronger. However, Chi Yu still groaned. He was shocked to find that although the evil aura could not penetrate his Kirin Red and Kirin armor, after the aura attacked his body, it actually split into several stages and exploded. Each explosion appeared right after the previous explosion. In the blink of an eye, it had completed 13 explosions. Even the Kirin armor could completely ignore one explosion, but the energy of 13 evil explosions was already very impressive, not to mention that it was an attack from both sides at the same time. The Qilin Scarlet and Qilin armor could not be broken by the opponent, but the violent impact caused Qi Yu to taste sweetness in his throat and spit out a mouthful of blood. Fresh blood sprayed onto the Qilin bead, causing the Qilin bead's 4 colors to brighten. Qi Yu let out a furious roar as his body slightly spun in the air, throwing away the 2 evil energies that had ambushed him. After being thrown away, the 2 evil energies did not continue to attack, but immediately disappeared into the darkness. Qi Yu didn't even need to think to guess who had attacked him. Although the experts from the Sun Nation's Spirit Devourer Hall were quite strong, none of them had the strength to fight against the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Obviously, the 2 Spirit Devourers from the Spirit Devourer Hall weren't among them. It wasn't that the Spirit Devourers didn't come to Chongqing Temple, but that they were waiting for an opportunity. Only when Qi Yu and Vampire Prince Klinsman reached the most crucial moment did they suddenly launch a sneak attack. They had chosen the moment when Qi Yu was at his weakest. The 2 first-class Soul Devourers did not kill Qi Yu as they had hoped, but because of their influence, Qi Yu needed the Fire Thundercloud Force to activate his Kirin Red, so he immediately relaxed his encirclement on Vampire Prince Klinsman. Klinsman had been famous for thousands of years, so how could he let go of this opportunity? When Qi Yu was injured, he gathered his remaining courage and rushed out. This time, he would not rashly fight with Qi Yu. He teleported over 100 meters away, gasping for air. Qi Yu was furious, but he could not chase after the 2 first-class Soul Devourers. Klinsman was indeed injured by his series of attacks, but he was also injured. Compared to the 2 Sun Nation guys, Klinsman was obviously a much bigger threat. Stimulated by Qi Yu's injury, the Water Thundercloud Force in his body automatically activated Kirin Muscle Tendon Changing and Marrow Cleansing, quickly healing the injuries in Qi Yu's body. Klinsman gloomily looked at Qi Yu. His originally pale face now had a tinge of red. Qi Yu didn't know that this was a condition that would only appear when a vampire was seriously injured. For Qi Yu, vomiting blood was to relieve the pressure of his injury. But for vampires, it was a different story. Vampires relied on sucking blood to survive. When they vomited blood, it meant that they had suffered serious injuries. Kirin's Thundercloud Force and Thundercloud Force were not so easy to deal with. At this time, they were wreaking havoc in Klinsman's body. His darkness special ability could barely be suppressed. On the surface, Klinsman did not seem to have much of a problem, but he did not have much ability to fight anymore. Ryue, Ming, and Su Dong had all completed their origin form mutation. With their help, the Covenant of Darkness was gradually suppressed. At this moment, the flames around the Berserk Bearmen were finally extinguished. One had to admit that their defenses were very strong. They didn't die even after being burned by the Qilin's true fire. However, each and every one of them sat on the ground, gasping for breath. Their bodies had turned into the color of charcoal, and their berserk state had been removed. Therefore, the only ones fighting against the Zodiac Guardian warriors were the Wolf King Garnet, his demon wolfmen, and the 5 Vampire Duke. The situation had taken a turn for the worse, and they were completely suppressed. "Stop!" Klinsman shouted in a low voice. All the members of the Covenant of Darkness immediately flew back. The demon werewolves pulled the raging bearmen and surrounded him. The Wolf King Garnet and the Bear King Baslu surrounded him. The two looked at each other. Obviously, they did not expect Klinsman to lose. Klinsman pointed a finger at Qi Yu. "Kid, this is the second time. Let's go." Qi Yu snorted coldly. "You want to leave? I'm afraid it won't be that easy. Hand over my friend." Klinsman snorted disdainfully. "Are you dreaming? I won't hand her over to you. Even if I do, so what? Can you guarantee her safety? Don't forget, she is now a real vampire. Staying by my side is the best choice." Qi Yu's eyes flashed coldly. Klinsman, if you are not afraid that all the members of the Covenant of Darkness will die here today, you can choose not to call Chinger out. A strange smile appeared on Klinsman's face. Is that so? Do you think I care about the lives of these people? Compared to them, my sister's life is much more important. Don't forget that we are different from you. For us, as long as we can protect ourselves, there is nothing we can't sacrifice. The faces of the Bear King Baslu and the Wolf King Garnet changed. They knew that if the Easterners in front of them really wanted to keep them here, it was not impossible. Previously, they had fully experienced the power of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Their tenacious fighting will and powerful energy had left a deep impression on them. Among them, although Klinsman was seriously injured, he still had an escape artifact, instant teleportation. Only he could escape unscathed. There was no such thing as morality in the Covenant of Darkness. Klinsman was right. When the time came, he would definitely abandon them. Chi-Yu looked at Klinsman and suddenly smiled. It seems that His Excellency the Vampire Prince values Chinger very much. Hearing Chi-Yu mention Su Qing, the coldness on Klinsman's face surprisingly disappeared a little, and a trace of gentleness appeared in his eyes. That's right. In this world, nothing is more important than my sister, not even my own life. Ming Ming came to Chi-Yu's side and said angrily, "You bigot! If you really like Chinger, you shouldn't have turned her into a vampire." Klinsman said somewhat crazily, "What's wrong with turning into a vampire? We vampires have endless life. As long as I'm here, my sister won't even age. Isn't this the greatest wish of every woman? These are things that you humans can't do. I'm only thinking about my sister." Chi-Yu stopped Ming Ming, who was about to rush out. He smiled indifferently and said, "In that case, let's stop here for today." Chi-Yu. Ming Ming called out with some dissatisfaction. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "However, just because we're willing to let you go doesn't mean that they're willing to let you go." As he spoke, Chi-Yu pointed behind the people of the Covenant of Darkness. Klinsman was shocked. When he looked back, he saw dozens of figures quietly approaching them from behind. He couldn't be more familiar with the aura. Despicable. They're from the Vatican. Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "Yes, it's them. To be honest, I don't really like these people from the Vatican. They're like the police in the movies, always appearing after things are over. However, it seems that their appearance at this time is fatal to you." As soon as Chi-Yu's voice fell, Lu Yuan's voice was heard. "Mr. Chi, I'm really sorry. We're late again. We rushed over as soon as we received the news. We didn't expect you to have already started fighting. How is it? Are you all right?" Chi-Yu said indifferently, "Do I look like I'm not? Since you're already here, I'll leave the people of the Covenant of Darkness to you." A smile appeared on Lu Yuan's face. Under the illumination of the starlight, he was the first to walk out of the shadows. It was unknown when he had changed into a formal suit. The paladins and knights of light that Chi-Yu had seen previously slowly appeared behind him, forming a semicircle that surrounded the experts of the Dark Parliament. However, Klinsman's handsome face became slightly distorted. "What a joke, Lu Yuan. Although we've suffered some damage, do you think that you can deal with us with just these people?" Lu Yuan smiled indifferently and said politely, "Of course not. You're a vampire prince. Moreover, you have 5 unscathed vampire Grand Dukes. We obviously don't have enough people. However, if we really only have these people, wouldn't it tarnish your reputation as a vampire prince?" Klinsman was already putting on a strong front. After hearing Lu Yuan's words, his expression changed drastically. He already felt that he hated even more, and this aura could completely threaten him. Behind the Knights of Light, 6 people walked out slowly. The person in the lead was dressed in a white robe and held a book in his hand. Upon closer inspection, it seemed to be a Bible. The 5 people behind him were all dressed in red robes. Each of them had calm expressions and placed their right hands on their chests as they walked out slowly. This time, not only did Klinsman's expression change, but the expressions of Wolf King Garnet, Bear King Baslu, and the other members of the Covenant of Darkness also changed. Klinsmann's voice clearly became sharper. Cardinal Ogra is dead and 5 cardinals are dead. You really think too highly of me. Lu Yuan bowed respectfully to the 6 cardinals. The man in the white robe, whom Klinsmann addressed as Ao Gera, stepped forward slowly and nodded slightly. Greetings, respected vampire Prince Klinsmann. Klinsmann snorted coldly. Do you still think that I'm good to meet you under such circumstances? Ao Gera smiled and said, I don't want to meet you under such circumstances either. Although the Vatican and the Covenant of Darkness have always been at odds, it has been many years since people of our level have met each other. This time I have no choice. If your Highness can swear on the heaviest oath of the blood kindred to give up this operation of the Covenant of Darkness and send Audi Mundo back to the Vatican, I can make the decision to let you leave. Klinsmann smiled. The smile on his handsome face made him look unusually gloomy. Ao Gera, are you kidding me? Audi Mundo's position in the Covenant of Darkness is not inferior to mine. Not to mention me, even the speaker would not dare to give him up easily. Moreover, he betrayed the Vatican and joined our side, bringing great benefits to the Covenant of Darkness. Now, he is the #1 hero of the Covenant of Darkness. Even if I swear on him, do you think it will work? A hint of sadness appeared in Ao Gera's eyes. That's a pity. There are only 2 cardinals in the Vatican. I never thought that Audi Mundo would betray the Vatican. Your Highness, you can leave now. I know that even though you are injured, I can't make you stay. However, I'm afraid that your subordinates will have to follow us back to the Vatican to be judged. Chapter 89. Klinsmann's eyes shone with a complicated light, but it only flickered for a moment before returning to normal. He said coldly, Ao Gera, when you go back, don't forget to pray that you don't fall into my hands one day. Before he could finish his sentence, his body suddenly stiffened. He turned around with some difficulty, and his gaze fell on Garnet's face. Garnet ignored Klinsmann's gaze. He looked at Cardinal Ao Gera and said coldly, I wonder, in the eyes of the Church, which is more important, the Vampire Prince or us? If you think the Vampire Prince is more important, please swear in the name of the Holy Father that I will hand Klinsmann over to you. Chiyu, who was standing in the distance, was stunned when he saw Garnet's actions. Then, he understood. The Covenant of Darkness was indeed worthy of its name. Interesting. Looks like it's going to be lively today. Zagru secretly held Chiyu's hand. A wave of peaceful Buddhist power flowed into Chiyu's body through the relic bead. With the help of the Buddhist power, Chiyu's Kiran's muscle tendon changing and marrow cleansing reached its peak, rapidly healing his injuries. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors also understood that this was not the end of the shocking event. They quietly recovered their strength. Ao Gera's gaze met Chiyu's from afar. He nodded slightly at Chiyu. This ordinary-looking middle-aged man smiled and said, Interesting indeed, Your Highness. You probably never thought that the Covenant of Darkness's expertise in the art of sluggishness would one day be used on you, right? This must be Wolf King Garnet. Not bad, Your Highness' judgment is correct. To the Church, the Vampire Prince Klinsmann, whose strength is close to that of the Blood Emperor, is obviously more important. All right, since you're willing to trade him for your freedom, I, Cardinal Audra, swear in the name of the Holy Father, the Holy Son, and the Holy Spirit that as long as the Dark Parliament hands over Vampire Prince Klinsmann to the Holy Church, the Holy Church will not make things difficult for them today, and will let him go. Garnet heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at the 5 vampire Grand Dukes and said coldly, Although all of you are from the Dracula family, I believe that all of you wish to become the new Vampire Prince and enter the core of the Covenant of Darkness to become a counselor. I had no choice but to do what I did today. I hope you can understand that if I didn't do this, you would have died as well. The 5 Grand Duke vampires remained silent, as if they didn't know what was happening. Klinsmann didn't say anything. Wolf King Garnet had cast slow at full power. In his current condition, there was no way he could break free. He knew what would happen to him if he fell into the hands of the Holy Church. His eyes were filled with despair. Audra waved his hand and the 4 holy knights, led by Lu Yuan, walked towards the Covenant of Darkness. Wolf King Garnet looked at Klinsmann and said coldly, "Just now, you said that under certain circumstances, anyone can be betrayed for their own sake. I'm sorry, but if you don't die today, then we will." As he spoke, he was already prepared to face the 4 holy knights. At this moment, an incongruous sound rang in Garnet's ears. Kieran's phantom steps. A faint shadow flashed by, and Garnet felt his whole body go numb for a moment. Then, Klinsmann disappeared from his hand. Garnet was shocked and immediately attacked in the direction of his thoughts, but he hit nothing but air. Chi Yu grabbed Klinsmann with his right arm, and in the blink of an eye, he had already returned to the Zodiac Guardian warriors. The Thundercloud force cooperated with Kieran, and when no one was paying attention to him, he easily snatched Klinsmann from Garnet's hands. Lu Yuan said in shock, "Mr. Qi, what do you mean by this?" Chi Yu shrugged his shoulders and said, "Nothing much, I just feel that it's a little unfair. We were the ones who fought with our lives on the line just now. It's a little too unfair for the people from the church to want a vampire prince the moment they arrive. So, I feel that it's better for this vampire prince to fall into my hands as a spoil of war." As he spoke, he tapped Klinsmann's body with his left hand. Black and silver light entered Klinsmann's body at the same time. He used the purest power of Kieran's bloodline to seal him. Not to mention Klinsmann, even a 10,000-year-old beast would not be able to escape once it was sealed. Garnet, the Wolf King, and Baslu, the Bear King, stiffened. Would the Holy Church let them go after losing Klinsmann? Aogera looked at Chi Yu from afar and said, "Mr. Qi, I admit that we came a little late today. I apologize on behalf of the Holy Church. However, this vampire Prince Klinsmann is an extremely dangerous person. I think it's better for you to hand him over to us. He's useless to you. We'll bring him back to trial and burn him at the stake." Chi Yu shook his head and said, "Esteemed Cardinal, how do you know that Klinsmann is useless to us? I'm sorry, but I can't hand him over to you. I think it's better for you to deal with these people from the Covenant of Darkness first." Then, he grabbed Klinsmann and led the Zodiac Guardian warriors into the Chongqing Temple. Lu Yuan gave Aogera a questioning look. Aogera hesitated for a moment, then shook his head gently. All of the experts of the Covenant of Darkness had already gathered together, secretly preparing themselves. Although they knew that they had no chance of escaping against a cardinal bishop and 5 red-robed archbishops, they were not willing to be captured and tied to the stake just like that. Aogera slowly held the Bible in his hand in front of his chest. The holy light had already begun to shine. Different from the holy light of the holy knights, the holy light radiating from his body was silver. The energy aura did not seem strong, but when the silver holy light appeared, all the people from the Holy Church showed expressions of respect. "Hold on." A gentle voice suddenly sounded. Aogera was shocked. In the Holy Church, his strength was second only to the Pope. The sudden appearance of this voice was clearly nearby, but he did not notice it. This showed how powerful this person was. "Who's there?" A group of 7 people slowly walked out from the other side of the Chongqing Temple. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air, without any warning. Be it the people from the Holy Church or the remnants of the Covenant of Darkness, they all focused on the 7 people who suddenly appeared. One of them was in front, while the other 6 were at the back. The one walking at the front was a woman in a long white dress. Her long purple hair flowed softly behind her, and her soft purple eyes revealed a faint smile. In the eyes of the people from the Holy Church, her perfect face was nothing more than a real angel. At the same time, Aogera felt a huge amount of energy from her that made him afraid. Behind her were 3 men and 3 women, each carrying a large box on their back. The men were all tall and handsome, while the women each had their own characteristics, but all of them were Western beauties. Cardinal Aogera's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are from Greece?" The leading woman smiled. Her charming smile was filled with a holy aura. "Yes. Hello, Mr. Cardinal Aogera. We are from Greece. You can call me by my Chinese name, Yamu." "Yamu Yamu." Aogera's eyes suddenly narrowed. He took a deep breath and said, "You are the successor of Athena, the goddess of war and wisdom, and the current guardian of Greece." Yama said indifferently, "I don't deserve to be called the guardian of Greece, but I did inherit part of Athena's power." Aogera was, after all, a core member of the upper echelon of the Holy Church. After a short moment of surprise, he quickly returned to normal. His eyes swept across the 3 men and 3 women behind Yamu. He smiled and said, "Then you must be the constellation guardians of Goddess Athena?" Yamu nodded slightly and said, "Perhaps we have appeared at the wrong time. However, Yamu is here to plead for the people from the Covenant of Darkness." Aogera frowned and said, "Miss Yamu, you should know that the Covenant of Darkness is the common enemy of the West. This is a good opportunity to reduce their strength. I don't understand why you are pleading for them." Yama glanced at the Wolf King Garnet and the Bear King Baslu and said, "Killing won't solve any problems. Moreover, I'm afraid the Holy Church's purpose for coming here is not to kill the people from the Covenant of Darkness. They are now a group of dragons without a leader. Why should they be so ruthless? Although the Holy Church and the Covenant of Darkness have been at odds for many years, if the Covenant of Darkness were to launch a crazy revenge, I'm afraid it wouldn't be a good thing for the Holy Church. Why don't we take a step back and let them go back to the West?" Aogera's eyes flashed. He slowly put down the Bible in his hand and revealed a strange smile on his face. He said, "Since Miss Yamu is pleading for them, then fine. We will let them go this time. Garnet, Baslu, if you do evil again, the Holy Church will definitely punish you. Go. I don't want to see you in the Yen Wang Republic ever again." Garnet and Baslu heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. They looked deeply at Yamu but did not say any words of gratitude. They left the Chong Xing Temple with the remnants of the Covenant of Darkness as quickly as they could. The lineup sent by the Covenant of Darkness this time could not be said to be weak. However, they were destined to fail from the beginning. Even if they sent more Dark Masters, the result would not change. After all, they were not only facing the Holy Church, but also the Eastern Guardians led by Chi Yu and the Greek Guardians led by Yum. 3 against 1, how could they stand a chance? After watching the remnants of the Covenant of Darkness leave, Aogera slowly walked to Yamu and said with a smile, "Miss Yamu, you should have seen everything that happened before. It seems that in this land of the East, we are still far inferior to the Eastern Guardians like the Zodiac Guardian warriors. They have now entered the Chong Xing Temple. If you think it's okay, I think it's best for us, who are also from the West, to choose to cooperate." Behind Yamu, Soso snorted and said charmingly, "Aren't you also working with the Zodiac Guardian warriors?" Aogera said, "Yes, we were working with the Zodiac Guardian warriors before, but now it seems that they are not sincere at all. After all, our Western culture is different from their Eastern culture, and we are also from the West. We should have more in common, shouldn't we?" Yamu nodded gently and said, "The Greek Guardians and the Vatican have always helped each other. Originally, we should not have participated in this matter, but the energy that His Majesty the Pope has discovered is too great. We do not want to fall into their hands and cause harm to the world. Since Bishop Aogera thinks that we can cooperate, then Yamu has no objection. But I wonder how Your Excellency thinks we should cooperate?" Even though Aogera had been in the Vatican for many years, he could not help but feel a little moved when he saw Yamu. It was not that he had any dirty thoughts in his mind, but the holy aura that Yamu exuded almost naturally attracted his attention. After thinking for a while, Aogera said, "Previously, we have observed that the Guardians of the East led by Mr. Chi seem to have some relationship with the monks here. To be honest, His Majesty the Vatican has done accurate divination and found that the sacred origin is in this Chongqing temple, and it is most likely to be in the main tower. Now that they have entered the main tower, I think we should find a way to lure them out. If the Zodiac Guardian warriors get the sacred origin, then I am afraid that it will be difficult for us, the Western Guardians, to fight against them in the future. Yamu smiled and said, I just said that I have no desire for the sacred origin. Now that the people of the Covenant of Darkness have left, it may be a good thing if the Zodiac Guardian warriors really get the sacred origin. I also know Mr. Qi. His aura is very pure, and his energy is completely in the category of justice. Aogera was stunned for a moment and said, Are you saying that Miss Yamu will let them get the sacred origin? Yamu shook her head and said, I think that the sacred origin should not belong to anyone. Otherwise, no matter who gets it, it will break the current balance. Bishop Aogera, you don't have to worry at all. It is not easy to absorb the sacred origin. It requires a long process. Moreover, haven't you noticed? The energy waves of the sacred origin are very unstable, and it is not suitable to absorb it now. So, I think you don't have to worry. It is very late now. I think we should rest here for a while and wait for Mr. Qi and the others to come out. Aogera's gaze shifted to the Thousand Seeker Tower. His heart skipped a beat, and he vaguely understood what Yamu meant. Previously, the people of the Covenant of Darkness and Soul Devourer Hall had entered Chongqing Temple, but they did not get any chance. At that time, Qi Yu and the others did not make a move. This Chongqing Temple was definitely not simple, especially that old monk. Since they could not absorb the sacred origin for the time being, rather than entering Chongqing Temple and risking their lives, they might as well wait for Qi Yu and the other Zodiac Guardian warriors to come out. At that time, if Qi Yu and the others had already obtained the sacred origin, it would not be too late to snatch it. If they did not get it, then they would have to think of other ways. Waiting outside was obviously the best choice. Before they could confirm that the Zodiac Guardian warriors had obtained the sacred origin, it was obviously unwise to fall out with them. After understanding this, Aogera smiled and nodded. He said, Very well, as Miss Yamu wishes. Everyone from the Vatican, rest here. Lu Yuan, assign some people to keep an eye on that white tower. Yamu nodded slightly, then led the 6 people behind her to a big tree and sat down. The Zodiac Guardians that followed her placed the big boxes on their backs beside them, and leaned on their boxes, surrounding Fish Eye in the center. Aogera secretly observed Yamu. The less energy Yamu emitted, the more mysterious Yamu became in his eyes. With his holy power, he faintly discovered that the energy of each of the Zodiac Guardians around Yamu was very strange. But they were also very powerful. There was dark energy in them, and there was also very pure light energy. The Vatican and the Greek Zodiac Guardians had always been in a cooperative relationship, but the Vatican had always been very wary of the Greek Zodiac Guardians. After all, in the entire West, the Vatican seemed to have a dominant position, but those who were really familiar with these people knew that unless the Greek Zodiac Guardian was not a Lord God, the Vatican could not compare to them. This time, the Greek Zodiac Guardian was actually one of the most powerful Lord Gods in Greek mythology, the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena. It would be strange if Aogera did not have his guard up. As they waited quietly, Qi Yu had already led the Zodiac Guardian God warriors back into the Thousand Seeker Pagoda. Once inside, Qi Yu first threw Klinsman to the side, then told the old monk that he had met Zagru. After listening to Qi Yu's introduction, Zagru was so shocked that his Buddhist power fluctuated violently. The old monk smiled and said, We have already met when you were still a baby. Zagru, you have done much better than me. Zagru put his palms together and bowed respectfully to the old monk. Master, I really did not expect to have the chance to meet you again. I have heard from my master about everything you have experienced. Actually, what happened back then was not your fault. The old monk sighed and said, The past is the past. All these years, I have long forgotten everything. Everything is empty, everything is empty. Ba. Chi-Yu's heart skipped a beat. He said, "You guys chat first. I want to have a good talk with this vampire prince." He lifted Klinsman and put him down in a corner. Klinsman was indeed a powerful vampire prince. Even though the Buddha energy in the Thousand Seeker Tower was very strong, it did not have much of an effect on him. Furthermore, he was able to resist the Buddha energy even when he was heavily injured. This showed how powerful he was. Klinsman looked coldly at Chi-Yu, and Chi-Yu looked back at him. "Why? Do you hate me, Your Highness?" Klinsman snorted. "Am I supposed to like you?" Chi-Yu smiled. "Forget it then. I have no interest in Piggyback Mountain." Klinsman was stunned. Piggyback Mountain? What kind of mountain is that? This is really hard to explain. Just treat it as a mountain. Klinsman, if you are smart, tell me where Chinger is. Klinsman closed his eyes and said, "Although I'm in your hands, it's impossible for me to find my sister." Chi-Yu said angrily, "Klinsman, you are in no position to negotiate with me. If you are smart, you should be able to guess what kind of situation Chinger is in. It is much better for you to be in my hands than in the hands of the Vatican. Otherwise, you will be burned at the stake. I don't know what's going on with your subordinates, but there hasn't been any energy collision outside for a long time. I'm afraid the Holy Church has already let them go. You're not afraid of death, but aren't you afraid that your companions will harm Chinger? Don't forget, since they've already betrayed you, they definitely don't want you to go back, even if it's your own clansmen. As for us, we're all Su Qing's friends. We've found Chinger, and we won't harm her." Klinsman opened his eyes again. There was a trace of panic in them. Chi-Yu could see that this vampire prince was really worried about Su Qing's safety. He couldn't help but have a good impression of him. "All right, hurry up and tell me, or it will be too late." Klinsman sighed and said, "Go 5 kilometers west from here. You'll find a small waterfall there. I've dug a cave behind the waterfall. Chinger is sleeping there. Although Garnet and Baslu don't know about this, my vampire duke subordinates do. However, the Vatican is outside now. If you are alone, are you not afraid of them?" Chi-Yu said, "That is not something you need to worry about." As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed out of the Thousand Seeker Tower. The moment he left, his figure disappeared completely. "Chi-Yu," Ming Ming called out. "Don't worry. They can't find me. I will be careful." As the voice faded away, Chi-Yu had already left. With the previous experience of being discovered by Yamu, this time, Chi-Yu carefully left the Thousand Seeker Tower. The moment he stepped out of the tower, he immediately flew up. The sky was dark, and with Kirin Yin's invisibility ability, he quickly rose into the sky. After a brief observation of the situation below, Chi-Yu immediately discovered the presence of Yamu and the others. Yamu actually brought 6 constellation guardians with her. When Chi-Yu saw Yamu, his emotions could not help but fluctuate. After all, Yamu was the only person he could not see through so far. Although he had already guessed that Yamu would definitely come here, when he saw her with his own eyes, Chi-Yu was still somewhat worried. Flying quickly in the sky, Chi-Yu quickly discovered the people of the Covenant of Darkness. Just as he had guessed, the remnants of the Heian Council were now heading west. However, as the Raging Bearmen were seriously injured, their overall speed was very slow. Chi-Yu thought to himself, what a close shave. Now that he was quite a distance away from the Chongqing Temple, he retracted his aura and pushed his wind and cloud force to the limit. Like a bolt of lightning, he flew towards the place Klinsman had mentioned. The distance of 5 kilometers was too short for flying. In just a few breaths, Chi-Yu found the small waterfall that Klinsman mentioned. The waterfall was indeed very small, with a drop of only about 10 meters. It seemed to be a branch of Arai Lake. With a flash of light in his eyes, the thundercloud force floated into the waterfall. The water of the waterfall seemed to become a part of Chi-Yu's body, directly parting to the sides. Chi-Yu saw the dark red coffin behind the waterfall. With a wave of his hands, Kirin's thundercloud force, the coffin floated out. Chi Yu did not want to have any conflict with the people of the Covenant of Darkness now. As soon as he got the coffin, he immediately floated up and quickly left in another direction. Kirin could only make Chi Yu invisible alone or with another person, so he couldn't bring the coffin back. He had to find a place to release Su Qing first. If the Covenant of Darkness didn't discover Su Qing's coffin, Chi Yu was too lazy to think about it. He flew for more than 10 kilometers before stopping in a small col next to Tsang Mountain. The surface of the dark red coffin seemed to contain a special energy. The dark aura was very pure. Observing it from a close distance, Chi Yu found that there were some dark golden lines on the coffin. The craftsmanship was extremely exquisite. Chi Yu patted his head and scolded himself for being stupid. Although Kirin couldn't bring the coffin with him, he still had the Kirin pearl. As long as he put the coffin into the Kirin pearl, he could bring it back, right? With the increase of his thundercloud force, although the coffin was a little bigger, there would be no problem putting it into the Kirin pearl. However, since he was already so far away, it was better to release Su Qing first. Chi Yu was also very anxious to know Su Qing's situation. As soon as he thought of this, Chi Yu carefully probed the coffin lid. Exerting a bit of force, he pushed it open. As soon as the coffin was opened, Chi Yu immediately saw Su Qing. There were no changes as he imagined. Su Qing, who was lying in the coffin, didn't seem to be any different from before, but her pretty face had lost some color. He didn't know why, but Su Qing's appearance didn't change as Ming Ming. However, she seemed to be even more different than before. The black robe wrapped around her charming body. She still had the dark red long hair, but now her hair looked a little more lustrous. The inside of the coffin was very exquisite. There was a thick soft cushion. As soon as it was opened, not only did it not have the expected smell of blood, but there was an elegant fragrance, which made people feel refreshed. Chi Yu didn't hesitate too much. He held Su Qing's little hand and carefully probed his thundercloud force into her body. There was nothing wrong with Su Qing's body. After Chi Yu's thundercloud force entered her body, he immediately found that her 8 extraordinary meridians were completely unblocked. A pure dark energy was circulating in her meridians. The energy intensity was very high. Although such pure energy was of the dark attribute, if it was used properly, it should be very beneficial for cultivation. It seemed that Klinsmann really treated her very well. As he thought about it, Chi Yu's thundercloud force continued to move upwards. When his thundercloud force carefully entered Su Qing's brain, he immediately found the reason why she was unconscious. Su Qing's spiritual power was locked by a faint energy, which caused her to fall into a deep sleep. Under the effect of Kirin's thundercloud force, Klinsmann's seal was obviously not a problem. A faint light flashed, and Su Qing slowly woke up from her coma. "Ah! How long did you make me unconscious again? You bad guy, let me go back. I'm not your sister, I want to go home." Su Qing shouted in panic before she opened her eyes. "Qing calm down. It's me, I'm Chi Yu." Chi Yu injected a thundercloud force into Su Qing's body to stabilize her breathing while calling out softly. Su Qing opened her eyes in a daze. When she saw Chi Yu, she even rubbed her eyes. "Chi Yu, it's really you. I'm not dreaming, am I?" Chi Yu smiled and said, "Is a dream so real? Qing, I'm here to save you. You're free now." Su Qing suddenly reached out and pinched Chi Yu's arm hard. Chi Yu couldn't help but cry out in pain. "What are you doing? It's fine if you don't thank your savior, but why did you pinch me?" Su Qing said embarrassedly, "I just wanted to see if I was dreaming or not. Since you feel pain, then it shouldn't be a dream." Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Missy, why didn't you pinch yourself then?" Su Qing rolled her eyes at him and said, "Why are you asking such a stupid question? It hurts so much. I'm very afraid of pain." Chi Yu looked at her and was speechless. "You're afraid of pain, but I'm not? Dao sect is really unlucky. this little witch seemed to have returned to her previous liveliness. Su Qing glanced at the coffin she was in, and her face became a little pale. That vampire? Chiyu said, I caught him. Come out first. It's not a comfortable thing to lie in a coffin. As he said that, he helped Su Qing out of the coffin. Chapter 90. Chiyu smiled and said, You should have seen that I'm not an ordinary person. Although that vampire was strong, he was much weaker than me. Of course he wasn't my opponent. Su Qing snorted and said, You're so full of yourself. But, no matter what, I have to thank you. Chiyu looked at Su Qing strangely and said, Qing do you know your current situation? Su Qing smiled and said, What do you mean? Becoming a vampire? Of course I know. Chiyu was surprised and said, Then, aren't you afraid? Su Qing said, I was afraid at first, but that vampire wasn't ugly and he was very good to me. After listening to his explanation every day, I now feel that becoming a vampire is not a bad thing. It's just that drinking blood is a little disgusting. Is there something wrong with your brain? Chiyu was shocked by Su Qing's words and hurriedly touched her forehead. Su Qing's forehead was a little cold, but she seemed to be very clear-headed. Your brain is broken. I'm telling the truth. Think about it, after becoming a vampire, first of all, I don't have to die. Moreover, that guy said that if I get his red gold primordial blood, I will directly become a high-level vampire. I won't even be afraid of the sun and can live like an ordinary person. And most importantly, he promised me that no matter how long it takes, I won't grow old. I'll always be this beautiful. Think about it, after a few decades, you'll be an old man, but I'll still be this beautiful and youthful. How wonderful would that be? Chiyu swallowed his saliva and said with a bitter smile, It seems that you're quite happy being a vampire. Su Qing stuck out her tongue at Chiyu and said, Can I not be a vampire if I'm unhappy? That guy told me that becoming a vampire is already a fact. No one can change it. Since that's the case, what's the use of suffering? I might as well accept it. Look forward. I've always been like this. In this life, I only regret one thing. As she spoke, she looked at Chiyu with a hint of guilt. Chiyu let out a long breath and said, It's good that you can think that way. At least you can live happily. Let bygones be bygones. However, I say, Qing why do I feel that saving you is unnecessary? Don't tell me you have fallen in love with that vampire prince? Although he is slightly more handsome than me, he is still a few thousand years old. You might as well choose me instead of him. Su Qing blushed and said, You're the worst. Even though Klinsmann turned me into a vampire, he treats me much better than you do. If I could choose anyone, I wouldn't choose a hooligan like you. Besides, you should know what kind of relationship I have with Sister Yun. I don't like stinky men like you. That Lin Simon doesn't have that kind of feelings for me at all. He really treats me like a little sister. You won't kill him, will you? Ever since I was young, even my parents didn't care for me like he did. Chiyu said, I was going to kill him, but now I think letting him go is a better choice. Are you still willing to follow him? Su Qing shook her head and said, No, I'm from Yinhuang. I'm not like those girls who worship foreign things and only want to go abroad. I think there's nowhere better than Yinhuang. Where is he now? Can you bring me to see him? Chiyu nodded and said, Then let's go. I'll put your coffin away first. It looks like a treasure. But what coffin? Can't you say something more auspicious? Chiyu laughed and said, Qing I still like you like this. Alright, let's go. With a flash of light, Chiyu put the coffin into his Kirin pearl. With one hand around Su Qing's slender waist, they soared into the air. Under the protection of Kirin pearl, their breath was hidden in the cloak at the same time, and they flew in the direction of Chongqing Temple. Wow, Chiyu, you can actually fly. Can I fly too? Klinsmann told me that I can fly now, but he hasn't taught me how to do it yet. The feeling of flying in the sky is so wonderful. Sitting in a plane is far inferior to the wind. Chiyu said, Qing can you be quiet? Let me tell you, I'm afraid of heights. If I get scared and loosen my grip, I won't be responsible. Alright, I'll stop. But Chi-Yu, can I discuss something with you? Chi-Yu was stunned and said, Go ahead. Su-Ching said, Can you not hurt Klinsman? Although I know he's a vampire and must have harmed a lot of people, he's really good to me. Chi-Yu hesitated and said, I understand what you mean. We'll talk about it after we see Klinsman. I can't even protect myself now. I haven't even thought about how to deal with your brother Klinsman. On the surface, the Zodiac Guardian warriors seemed to have the upper hand now that they had entered Chongqing Temple. However, when Chi-Yu saw Yamu and the 6 Zodiac Guardians outside the temple, he had some doubts in his heart. Yamu's strength was a mystery in itself. Even if he ignored her, as long as each of the Zodiac Guardians was as strong as Sora, it would be very difficult to deal with them. Chi-Yu clearly remembered the last battle with Sora. At that time, Sora obviously hadn't used her full strength. This time, the Zodiac Guardians all had a big box on their backs, which was probably their secret weapon. Overall, even if Sora's strength was not as strong as Ryu's, it should not be too far off. 6 Zodiac Guardians that were comparable to the 6 Cloud Zodiac Guardians were already strong opponents, not to mention the people from the Vatican. Even Klinsman panicked when he saw Aogera, which showed how powerful the Cardinal and Cardinal were. When they returned to Chongqing Temple, Chi-Yu was not in a hurry to land. He first observed the situation below. The people from the Vatican and Greece were the same as when he left, there was no change. Only then did he carefully restrain his aura and land in the temple. Perhaps because he was carrying someone, Chi-Yu's energy became a little impure. As he was falling, 2 gentle eyes pierced through the air, and Chi-Yu's heart tightened. When he looked at the gentle eyes, he saw Yamu looking in his direction. There was a faint light in her eyes, and there was a faint smile on her perfect face. She had obviously noticed him. However, Yamu did not seem to make things difficult for Chi-Yu. She just nodded gently in his direction and went back to meditating. When he landed in front of the Qian Sun Tower, Chi-Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Su-Ching, who was in his arms, suddenly trembled and let out a low moan. Although Su-Ching already had the energy of a vampire count, she was still far from Klinsman's. She was now a real vampire. Under the influence of the Buddha's light in Chongqing Temple, her body immediately reacted. Chi-Yu immediately understood. He quickly channeled his thundercloud force into Su-Ching's body, forming a layer of defensive energy on the surface of her body, blocking the Buddha's energy. Only then did Su-Ching stop trembling due to fear. I'm back. Chi-Yu pushed the door and entered. He saw the Zodiac Guardian warriors sitting on the ground, quietly recovering their thundercloud force. Zagru stood respectfully beside the old monk. The two were talking in a low voice. When they saw Chi-Yu return, they turned to look at Chi-Yu. The old monk nodded slightly to greet him. Chi-Yu put Su-Ching down. Although Klinsman could not move, he could still talk. Sister, are you okay? Su-Ching's eyes revealed a trace of a complicated light. She nodded gently and walked toward Klinsman. Klinsman could not use any ability at all. Chi-Yu did not care about him and walked directly to Zagru. He smiled and said, Masters, how did the conversation go? Zagru's face was very serious. He said in a low voice, Chi-Yu, the current situation is very disadvantageous to us. As the saying goes, catch a turtle in a swamp. You should also feel that those people outside, whether they are from the Vatican or the Greek Guardians, are a huge threat to us. Master Chong Xing and I have discussed in detail about the giant beast Sarira. Do you have any good suggestions? Chi-Yu frowned and smiled bitterly. If it is only the people from the Vatican, it will be easy. With my Kirin Pearl and Kirin Hidden, I can take at least 3 people away at a time. After a few times, it will be easy to escape from their encirclement. When that time comes, it will be very difficult for them to find us again. However, Yamu, who inherited the inheritance of the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, is very difficult to deal with. I don't know why, after my Kirin hidden becomes invisible, it will be very difficult to use it to leave this place. Chongqing sighed softly and said, everything has its own fate. We can't force it. Moreover, for us now, the biggest threat is not those people outside. Qi Yu's gaze fell on Zagru with a questioning look in his eyes. Zagru gently shook his head. It was obvious that he had encountered a lot of trouble. Qi Yu said, Master Chongqing, what do you mean? Chong Wuheng said, after you came here, besides the giant beast Saraira, you should have also felt the existence of other energy. A light flashed in Qi Yu's eyes. He suddenly understood what Chongqing was referring to. His expression changed slightly. He said, Master, are you telling me that the two ferocious beasts are trying to take advantage of the situation? Chongqing gently nodded and said, when you came here previously, I asked you to help me protect this pure land of Buddhism. It was aimed at the two ferocious beasts. They are the real threat. For a long time, the giant beast Saraira would come to my place every year. The two ferocious beasts have been coveting it for a long time. It's only because of the mutual restraint between them and the fact that I'm in Chongqing Temple that they haven't acted rashly. However, it's different this time. The giant beast Saraira has now entered the 9th transformation, which is also the last transformation. When this transformation is completed, it will completely become a living relic and there will no longer be any signs of energy emission. There will be no need for it to return here. Perhaps the Westerners outside don't know about this, but it's impossible that the ferocious beasts, who are also ancient giant beasts, don't know about this. Therefore, according to my judgment, they will definitely take action. Once they attack, I'm afraid it will be difficult to preserve this pure land of Chongqing Temple. Qi Yu gasped. It was already very difficult to face an ancient giant beast with more than 6,000 years of cultivation. Moreover, there was an even stronger giant beast with 10,000 years of cultivation. If these two guys were to attack together, he was afraid that Chongqing Temple would be razed to the ground in minutes. Now it was impossible to escape. The Vatican and the Greek guardians had completely blocked their way. After listening to Chongqing's words, Qi Yu felt that he and the Zodiac guardian god warriors were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They could face a huge crisis at any time. However, after all, Qi Yu had inherited the bloodline of Kirin, the king of divine beasts. After a short period of shock, he gradually calmed down. Kirin had never been afraid of any enemy, and the word fear did not exist in Qi Yu's dictionary. Great Master Chongqing, I want to know what kind of species these two ominous beasts are. What is their origin? Chongqing looked at Qi Yu's calm expression and revealed a trace of praise. He said, it's a long story. After many investigations, I roughly figured out their true identity. In the arai in front of Chongqing Temple, there is a water attribute ominous beast. Qi Yu immediately thought of the nether snake and said, is it a fish? Or is it a special species? Chongqing Temple said, if it is a fish or a fish-like ominous beast, I'm afraid it would have been destroyed by another ominous beast in the Tsang Mountains. The ominous beast in the arai is very rare even in ancient times. It is a water attribute and fire attribute super ominous beast, called Zodiac. I can't pronounce this word, and can't see the strokes clearly. It is a man-faced beast, with the body of an ox, a naked body, a human face, and horse feet. It likes to eat people, and its cry is like a baby's cry. Although its strength doesn't seem to be very strong on the surface, its true strength is unfathomable. Qi Yu had heard Zagru talk about some of the species of ancient giant beasts. Among them, the man-faced beast was mentioned. As long as it had a human face, regardless of whether it was an ominous beast or a divine beast, it was absolutely a superspecies. This guy called Zodiac was obviously not easy to deal with. Chongqing Temple continued, Swan Ni's nature is ferocious. Its mouth can spit out 9 adversity true fire, which can be said to be the world's most powerful fire energy. It can almost burn everything. However, because the 9 adversity true fire is too overbearing, Swan and I lives in the water. Under the Uri, there is an ice spring, which is suitable for suppressing the overbearing fire energy in its body, so that it can cultivate. When Chongqing Temple was built, the most important purpose was to suppress the 2 big ominous beasts here, especially this ferocious swan and I. If not for Chongqing Temple, and the delicious snow fish in the Uri for it to eat, I'm afraid this piece of pure land would have long been plunged into misery and suffering. Chi Yu nodded and said, "Then what is the other ominous beast?" Chongqing Temple said, "The other ominous beast's origin is even greater. It is a golden-winged eagle. In ancient times, Kirin was the king of divine beasts. He, who commanded all the divine beasts on the land, was the most revered object of all divine beasts. However, the land beasts were led by Kirin, and among the flying divine beasts there was the phoenix. After the phoenix gave birth to 2 children, it disappeared. However, even the phoenix itself did not expect that its 2 children would unexpectedly become ominous beasts. One of them was called Mahamayuri, who was naturally bloodthirsty. It was unknown how many lives it had massacred. Later, even Buddha was swallowed into its belly. After Buddha broke out of its belly, it originally wanted to kill it. However, considering that it was a descendant of the phoenix, and that it had broken out of its belly, in a sense, it could be said that it was born in Mahamayuri's belly. Therefore, it was later conferred the title of Buddha Mother, Mahamayuri Bodhisattva, and sealed it. Listening to Chongqing, Chi Yu already understood his meaning. "Great Master, you can't be telling me that the ominous beast on Song Mountain is the other child of the phoenix, right?" Chongqing sighed and said, "Although it's not right, it's not far. The other child of the phoenix was the Great Rock Wisdom King. The Great Rock Wisdom King had once established his own sect and fought against the ancient divine beasts. During his time, the Great Rock Wisdom King was the leader of all the ferocious beasts. As the Great Golden Rock Eagle, he had no natural enemies. He was so strong that 3 Kirin had gathered at that time, and 2 of them had used the ultimate Kirin arm to completely destroy him. On the other hand, the divine beasts had also suffered heavy losses. Even after several thousand years, they still hadn't recovered. Naturally, the one on the Tsang Mountain was not the dead Great Rock Wisdom King, but his descendant, the only remaining golden-winged Great Rock Eagle. Not only did he have 10,000 years of cultivation, he also had a portion of the Great Rock Wisdom King's abilities. Even if all the ferocious beasts in the Great Beast Realm were added together, it would probably be ranked in the top 5. It is one of the kings of the ancient beasts. CK your lungs. It's actually the king of the ferocious beasts. Although Chi Yu wasn't afraid, he also understood that his chances were even slimmer. Whether it was the swan and I that was mentioned in the Chongqing Temple, or the even more powerful golden-winged Great Rock Eagle, just one of them was enough to make the Zodiac Guardian God's warriors very difficult to deal with. How could they fight against 2 of them at the same time? Chongqing sighed and said, "I also know that these 2 ferocious beasts are powerful and stubborn. If it wasn't necessary, I wouldn't want you to get involved. However, from the current situation, I'm afraid that it's impossible for you to not participate. However, you don't have to worry too much. When the Chongqing Temple was built, its purpose was to suppress these 2 ferocious beasts. Although they later broke the seal because of their strength, the Buddhist Qi in the Chongqing Temple still has a great effect on them. Therefore, only by fighting against them in the Chongqing Temple will you have a chance." Chi Yu frowned and said, "Great Master, we are not afraid of fighting against the ancient beasts. However, you must know that there are still many powerful enemies outside the temple. If the 2 ancient beasts suddenly appear and attack here, I'm afraid that those people will also take advantage of the situation. At that time, how should we deal with them?" Chongqing lowered his eyebrows and said, "Let's leave everything to fate. Heaven has its own arrangement. We just need to do our best and leave it to fate." "No. Chi Yu roared, I am the master of my fate. No one can control my fate. Great Master Chongqing, since we are going to face such powerful enemies together, can you tell me if there is any magical weapon in the Chongqing Temple that can deal with the two ferocious beasts? We can also cooperate with them. Chongqing slowly raised his head and looked at Zagru and said, If we are talking about magical weapons in this Chongqing Temple, I'm afraid the best magical weapon to deal with the two ferocious beasts is Zagru. Chi Yu looked at Zagru in surprise. Zagru looked calm and still stood respectfully beside Great Master Chongqing. Chongqing said, The Buddha's living Sarira is the nemesis of all ancient beasts. No matter how powerful the beasts are, they will not be willing to fight against the living Sarira. This is because once the aura of the Buddha's living Sarira touches their bodies, their energy will be greatly reduced, and it will take a long time for them to recover. Moreover, Zagru has inherited the 10 reincarnations of Buddha. He may not be able to deal with ordinary people, but he is very suitable to deal with these ancient beasts. If it wasn't for the attraction of the giant beast's living Sarira, the two beasts would not dare to attack our Chongqing Temple. Since they want to come, I have no choice but to fight to the death. Based on my understanding of them, Zagru and I, together with a few Zodiac guardian warriors whose attributes can barely restrain them, should be able to resist them. However, the key problem now is those people outside. If they take advantage of the situation, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to divide your strength to protect the giant beast's living Sarira. Therefore, I have discussed with Zagru. Once the two beasts attack, we will be in charge of resisting, and one of you will immediately take away the giant beast's living Sarira. As long as the giant beast's living Sarira leaves here, completes its final transformation and conceals its aura, the two beasts will definitely retreat. After listening to Chongqing's words, Chi Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He thought to himself, Old monk Chongqing, if you had said so earlier, I wouldn't have had to worry. Judging from his appearance, the Buddha Chi of Chongqing Temple was clearly able to restrain the two ferocious beasts. With him and Zaglu presiding over here, it was not too difficult to resist the attacks of the ferocious beasts. Super beasts of the 10,000-year level. Fortunately, Chongqing Temple was here. Otherwise, they really did not know how to resist. Zagru said, I have discussed with the Great Master. We feel that the most suitable person to take away the giant beast's living Sarira is you. Me? No, it can't be me. Chi Yu said firmly. I want to stay here and fight together with my companions. As the bloodline heir of the king of divine beasts, how could he leave at this time? Chi Yu did not even think and rejected Zagru's proposal. Zagru said, Chi Yu, listen to me. Don't think that taking away the giant beast's living Sarira is an easy task. After weighing the danger, we chose you, the strongest among the Zodiac guardian god warriors. You should understand that taking away the giant beast's living Sarira will immediately make you the target of everyone. Perhaps we can resist the two beasts, some people from the Vatican and the Greek guardians, but there will definitely be people who will hunt you down. Under such circumstances, only you are the strongest and only you can bear this danger. Now, your advantage is that you can fly. As long as you fly away before they catch up, and help the giant beast's living Sarira complete its 9th transformation, all problems will be solved. Don't tell me you want to hand this difficult and dangerous task to others? Chi Yu was dumbfounded by Zagru's words. He carefully thought about it. Indeed, as Zagru said, taking away the giant beast's living Sarira was very dangerous. How could he hand it over to the other Zodiac guardian god warriors? Thinking of this, he could not help but smile bitterly and said, All right then, Great Master, let's temporarily settle on this. However, don't we have a way to change the target of the beasts to the people outside? After all, they are from the west. Although the ancient beasts are ferocious, they are still from the east. Looking at the glimmer of hope in Chi Yu's eyes, even Great Master Chongqing could not help but reveal a trace of a smile. If it was under normal circumstances, perhaps it would really be like this. However, don't forget that the two beasts' target is the giant beasts living Sarira, and the giant beasts living Sarira is in the Chongqing Temple. Therefore, unless those outsiders take the initiative to provoke them, the two beasts' target will only be us. Qiyu nodded. I understand. However, Grandmasters, can you tell me how long you have the confidence to resist those two ferocious beasts? Zagru and Chongqing looked at each other. Chongqing said, Don't worry. As long as we are here, it will be difficult for the two beasts to succeed. At least we can resist for 3 days and 3 nights. Zagru's living Sarira is the biggest variable. If it is only me, I am afraid that I can only resist for a day. The reason why the two beasts have not made a move on me is mainly because the Buddhist energy in the Chongqing Temple will have a great impact on them. The transformation of the giant beasts living Sarira will take about 2 days. As long as there are no variables, we can succeed. Zagru nodded and said, Qiyu, it is mainly up to you. If you take the giant beasts living Sarira away, you will face a great danger. However, as the king of the Zodiac and the strongest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, you are the most suitable candidate. This is also a responsibility that you must bear. At this point, Zagru suddenly paused. His eyes seemed to be a little hesitant. Qiyu shrugged and said, Is there anything else you need to remind me? Zagru took a deep breath and said, Although I do not want to see that happen, I have to tell you that if you cannot protect the giant beasts living Sarira under the enemy's pursuit, then you only have one choice. Qiyu's eyes flashed and said, You still want me to? Zagru nodded firmly and said, There is no other way. We do not want to see such a situation happen, but we must definitely not let the giant beasts living Sarira fall into the hands of the Westerners. Otherwise, the giant beasts living Sarira will also die, and it will make the Westerners stronger. Although it is very difficult to absorb the energy of the giant beasts living Sarira, we have to prepare for the worst. Amitabha, I have sinned, I have sinned. Qiyu's eyes flashed, but he did not say anything. Master Chongqing said, Qiyu, this is the decision that I have discussed with Zagru. You don't have to think too much about it. At the same time, I have to remind you that no matter what the final outcome is, you must first protect yourself. I do not want to see the tragedy that happened 100 years ago happen again. Do you understand? Kirin is of great importance to all the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Qiyu looked at the two heavenly summoners' concerned eyes and nodded gently. He said, I will do my best to protect myself. Even if it is not for the sake of the Zodiac Guardian warriors in the future, I cannot bear to part with them. As he spoke, his eyes swept across Ryue and Ming. At this time, other than Qiyu, the other Zodiac Guardian warriors were shining with a faint Buddhist light. Obviously, they were recovering their thundercloud force with the help of the two heavenly summoners. Zagru said, I am afraid that they will be too worried about you, so I used my Buddhist energy to help them recover their thundercloud force. Don't worry, as long as I am alive, I will definitely protect everyone. In the Chongqing Temple, you will be able to fully unleash my Buddhist energy. Qiyu nodded and looked at Klinsmann and Su Qing. He said, Qing'er, you stay here too. Masters, this is my friend. Although she has become a vampire, she did not do so willingly, so please take care of her. Klinsmann, for the sake of Qing'er, I will not kill you now. Whether you can live or not depends on whether my companions can withstand the attack soon. Klinsmann snorted disdainfully. He did not even look at Qiyu. His gentle eyes were completely focused on Su Qing in front of him. Christy, your big brother's ability is sealed now. I cannot protect you. I am really afraid of losing you again. Suddenly, as if he had made up his mind, he turned to look at Qiyu and said, Release my seal. For Christy's sake, I am willing to help you. Qiyu frowned. Do you think I will believe you? What credibility does your covenant of darkness have? Klinsmann said angrily, You are slandering the Great Blood Clan. Yes, sometimes I can betray my allies, but as long as the Blood Clan makes a promise, I have never violated it. Even the people of the Holy See know this very well. Compared to those hypocrites, our Blood Clan is much more noble. Chapter 91. Klinsmann looked at Chi Yu arrogantly and said, "Even if I only have a little energy left, I will protect Christie's safety. Even if I have to pay the price with my life. Do you know, when I was still very weak, my dear Christie was harmed by the Blood Clan of another family? At that time, I hated myself for not being able to protect my only family member. It was also from then on that I unleashed all my potential and trained with all my might. Finally, I have my current status. But so what if I become a vampire prince? I'll never get Christie back. When I first saw Su Qing after coming to Yanhuang, her temperament was exactly the same as my dead sister's. Mr. Qi, I solemnly beg you, please give me a chance to protect my sister. Even if I die, I don't want to have any regrets. I am willing to swear on the highest oath of the Blood Clan." Looking at Klinsmann's agitated eyes, Chi Yu could clearly feel the blood in his body flowing at high speed. He was obviously extremely excited. Looking at Su Qing's pleading eyes, he waved his hand and said, "Forget it, you don't have to swear. I will give you this chance. But I don't trust you. I trust Qing Er." As he spoke, Chi Yu flashed to Klinsmann's side. He squatted down and looked at him. "To be honest, I don't like vampires, especially a guy like you who thinks you're so noble." Klinsmann stared at Chi Yu and said, "I don't like you either." Chi Yu pressed his right hand on Klinsmann's chest and withdrew the Kirin thundercloud force from his body. He smiled and said, "Remember what you said? I don't care about your injuries now. Protect Qing Er, even if it's for your own sake." Klinsmann's body moved slightly, and the light in his eyes brightened. He looked deeply at Chi Yu and didn't say anything. He leaned against the wall behind him and closed his eyes. An expert like him was very clear about what was most important at this time. Instead of talking, it was better to recover some of his strength. Zagru said, "Chi Yu, you go up." "Go up?" Chi Yu looked at him in surprise. Zagru nodded on his behalf and said, "You should at least communicate with the giant beast Shirixin. Although its strength isn't strong, it can still be of some help to you." Chi Yu asked, "Could it be that it can speak like the deep-sea nether serpent?" Master Chongqing smiled and said, "Of course. Although the giant beast relic is unable to use the enormous energy in its body, it has many advantages that other ancient giant beasts cannot compare to under the influence of that enormous energy. Speaking was just one of them. At the same time, it could also transform into a human, which was no different from a real human. Go, once the beast arrives, immediately take it and leave through the window. Don't worry about what's happening here." Chi Yu nodded and said, "Take care, masters." He took one last look at Rue and Ming Ming. Taking a deep breath, he climbed up the simple wooden ladder to the top of the pagoda. Looking at Chi Yu's back as he left, Zagru sighed softly and said, "I hope we can get through this disaster safely." Master Chongqing said, "Zagru, we should also start preparing. You children are still young. What we need to do is not to attack, but to protect everyone's safety." Zagru nodded and said, "I understand what you mean, Master. Let's begin." With that, Zagru sat cross-legged and faced Master Chongqing's microphone. A faint Buddhist light gradually emerged from his body, and like the other Zodiac guardian warriors, he entered a meditative state. Chi Yu quickly reached the top of the pagoda. As he climbed, he looked out of the window from time to time. This pagoda was indeed a weapon. When he looked out of the window, the pagoda looked like it was about to collapse. It was a wonderful feeling. The higher he climbed, the more the unstable but powerful energy became clearer. The energy's aura was the same as the last time he saw it. Not only was there condensed fire energy, but there was also the aura of light that was similar to the holy power of the Vatican. The energy made Chi Yu feel very comfortable. Light energy brought warmth to the gods, and Chi-Yu had the fire thundercloud force, so he did not feel repulsed by the energy at all. Finally, Chi-Yu climbed up the last wooden ladder and arrived at the highest level of the Qian Sun Tower. Ah! Why is it you? When Chi-Yu entered this level, his body instantly stiffened. His eyes were filled with disbelief, and his body was trembling slightly. The shock in his eyes had never appeared even when he was facing the most powerful enemy. The area of the Thousand-Seeker Tower would decrease with each level that they went up. At the highest level of the tower, it was only around 10 square meters in size. A person was sitting in the middle of the highest level. Even though her entire body was enveloped in a powerful red energy, Chi-Yu was completely stunned when he saw her. That was because no matter how bright the energy was, it could not hide the person's face. The person sitting cross-legged at the top of the pagoda was actually Wen-Ting, who had secretly left the capital. The current Wen-Ting was obviously different from the one Chi-Yu knew. She was wearing a long white dress, and her black hair had turned fiery red for some reason. Her beautiful face revealed a pained expression, which made her look very lovable. At that moment, not only did she have the elegance of the past, but she also looked even more beautiful. In Chi-Yu's memory, only Yamu Ryue and Ming Ming could compare to her. Moreover, the feeling that Wen-Ting gave him was completely different. Compared to the other three women, she seemed more delicate. Wen-Ting opened her eyes with some difficulty. When her eyes met Chi-Yu's, a gentle smile appeared on her face. Chi-Yu, I knew you would come up here sooner or later. After a brief moment, Chi-Yu could no longer believe the reality before him. Why? Wen-Ting. You? Why are you here? Wen-Ting smiled and said, I'm sorry, Chi-Yu. I lied to you in the past. I didn't expect that we would meet in Dali, which is thousands of miles away. It seems that fate has brought us together again. When you came to Dali, I could already sense your aura. After you entered the Thousand-Seeker Tower, I knew that we would finally meet again. Wait. My mind is in a mess now. Wen-Ting, can you tell me what is going on first? Chi-Yu's voice was trembling. Although he had already seen everything before him, he was unwilling to believe that it was all true. Wen-Ting sighed, haven't you already seen it? You're a Qilin, so you'll naturally be able to sense my aura. That's right, I am the giant beast relic that Master Chong Xing mentioned to you. No. This is not real. Chi-Yu's body swayed and he strode towards Wen-Ting. The fiery red energy around Wen-Ting's body did not stop him. Chi-Yu grabbed Wen-Ting's shoulders and shook her body gently. Tell me, this is not real, right? How can you be the giant beast relic? You, Ming Ming, are from the capital city. Wen-Ting gently reached out her right hand and caressed Chi-Yu's face. Her hand was very hot, and it made Chi-Yu feel very comfortable. Silly, why are you still lying to yourself at a time like this? I am indeed the giant beast relic. To put it simply, I am not a human. If you have to assign me a category, you can call me a fire Qilin fox. Chi-Yu looked at Wen-Ting in a daze. However, his brain was working at full speed. Before he came up, he only felt sympathy for the almighty beast relic. However, when he saw that the almighty beast relic was actually Wen-Ting, his feeling of sympathy had changed. This unbelievable fact confused him, and he did not know how to deal with it. Wen-Ting smiled and said, There is nothing to be troubled about. When my mother passed away, I knew that this day would come. Actually, I have always been wrong. I have always held on to a glimmer of hope. Especially after I met you, I am even more unwilling to die. If I had fused the energy of the giant beast relic with you before this transformation, how good would that be? However, it is too late now. Before the 9th transformation is completed, I am temporarily unable to absorb any energy. No, Wen-Ting, I don't want any energy. But, are you really not a human? Chi-Yu's eyes flickered continuously. In his heart, besides Ryue and Ming Ming, Wen-Ting could be said to be the most important person. Although the two of them had not met many times, every time they met, it left a deep impression on Chi-Yu. especially since they had a lot in common. In Chi Yu's heart, he had long regarded Wen Ting as one of the closest people to him. The last time Wen Ting left the capital, he had fallen behind for a period of time. However, he never expected to meet her at this time and under this kind of situation. A trace of sadness appeared in Wen Ting's eyes. Is it really that important whether I am a human or not? Looking at the sadness in her eyes, Chi Yu knew that she had misunderstood. No, of course not. Wen Ting, don't misunderstand, I didn't mean that. It's just that your identity as a giant beast relic. Wen Ting said sadly, yes. My identity as a giant beast relic has always represented a tragedy. Chi Yu took a deep breath. Asterisk, 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 I don't care anymore. Wen Ting, don't worry, I will definitely protect you. Did you already know that I am Kirin? However, why didn't I feel Kirin's aura from you? You are a giant beast relic, you should also have 50% Kirin's bloodline. Wen Ting's complexion became a little better. She said with a smile, it is very difficult for a giant beast relic to survive. If I didn't have the ability to hide my aura, I'm afraid I would have been absorbed by someone many years ago. Under the situation where I deliberately hide, unless I enter the process of body transformation like now, otherwise, even a high monk like Master Chong Xing would not be able to discover the existence of the energy in my body. Kirin is suitable for discovering mudstone. I already knew that as early as in the Qing Bay. Perhaps you have also heard some rumors about me in the Qing Bay. If you are not Kirin, why would I take the initiative to approach you? Chi Yu nodded and said, so that's how it is. However, why didn't I feel that you took the initiative to approach me? Moreover, the last time I asked you to be my girlfriend, you refused. Wen Ting gave him a look and said, your head is full of dirty thoughts. I don't want to be your girlfriend. Chi Yu, listen to me, you go. Don't care about me anymore. Although I can't give my energy to you, I still have some methods that belong to me. Otherwise, other people will get my relic. Chi Yu's complexion changed and said, no, Wen Ting, I know what you want to do. But how can I watch you die without doing anything? Alright, don't try to persuade me. We are friends, right? Wen Ting nodded and said, of course we are. Chi Yu smiled faintly and said, that's enough. Even if we are just ordinary friends, I have the obligation to protect you. Don't worry, Master Chong Xing and Zagru have already arranged everything. I will bring you away from here. Don't worry about your safety. As he said that, he pulled Wen Ting's small hand, revealing a firm gaze. Wen Ting looked deeply at Chi Yu the cat and said, this, you holding my hand, doesn't seem to have anything to do with protecting me. This. Chi Yu hurriedly let go of Wen Ting's hand and said awkwardly, it's subconscious. I didn't mean it. Wen Ting laughed and said, I think you are used to it. I don't know how many girls have been fooled by a rogue like you. Chi Yu scratched his head and said, look at the time, you are still only paying attention to these things. You women, always so emotional. The smile on Wen Ting's face suddenly disappeared. Chi Yu, I am not human. Will you despise me? Chi Yu was stunned for a moment and said, of course not. Why would I despise you? In a sense, I am no longer a pure human. You have 50% of Kirin's blood in your body. If I despise you, wouldn't it be despising myself? Wen Ting bit her lips and said, then if I say that I agree to your request now, will you still be willing? Chi Yu stared at her in shock and cried out involuntarily, you're willing to be my girlfriend? But I already have a girlfriend. He had not dealt with the matter of Ming Ming and Ryu. At this time, suddenly hearing Wen Ting say this, he subconsciously hesitated. Wen Ting took the initiative to hold Chi Yu's hand and said, I don't care. Anyway, you are now at the top of the tower. Other than me, you are not allowed to be with other women. You have pursued me before. Now I agree. No matter what, I am already your girlfriend. Chi Yu did not understand why Wen Ting did this. He silently looked at her and did not know what to say for a moment. A sweet smile appeared on Wen Ting's pretty face. She leaned on Qi Yu's shoulder and put his big hand on her lower abdomen. Her whole body was in Qi Yu's arms. Qi Yu, you are very strange, right? Don't be too proud. In this special situation, consider it as me taking advantage of you. Qi Yu, do you know that I have been very afraid of relationships since I was a child? I am very afraid. But I may leave this world. If I don't have a relationship, I will be very unwilling. So, don't reject me, okay? Let me be your girlfriend for the time being. Even if it is only for a minute, I hope to be able to experience the feeling of love. Wen Ting Yu. Qi Yu suddenly felt his eyes moisten. He almost subconsciously pulled Wen Ting's delicate body into his arms. Wen Ting, no, I should call you Tingting. You are my girlfriend now. Don't say such discouraging words. Who said that you must die? Don't forget, your handsome, tall, and powerful boyfriend has inherited the bloodline of a Qilin. I'm the king of the divine beasts, the king of the Zodiac. With me around, who can understand a single strand of your hair? Wen Ting gently shook her head and said, Fool, you don't understand. No one knows the strength of the golden-winged eagle and Tao Wu better than me. Even Master Chong Sheng and the others have underestimated these two beasts. Among the beasts, they belong to the strongest system. After so many years of cultivation, the spiritual energy in Dali is very rich. All kinds of energy molecules are extremely abundant. This is their ability to constantly become stronger. I can already feel their aura locking my body tomorrow. I will not be able to escape. They have endured for so many years, waiting for this opportunity. Qi Yu coldly snorted and said, Then let them try. Tingting, no matter how strong they are, you must have confidence in me. If even you don't have confidence, then wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? Wen Ting smiled faintly and lightly hammered Qi Yu's chest. All right, I have confidence in you. Is that enough? Let's not talk about this. Since you are officially my boyfriend, then you have the right to know some things about my past. Since we don't have anything to do, I'll tell you about my past experiences, okay? Okay. Qi Yu agreed and lifted Wen Ting's body up a little, letting his head rest on his chest. It was more comfortable. The golden-red energy around Wen Ting's body was obviously much weaker than when he just reached the top of the tower. That energy felt like the thundercloud force in Qi Yu's body was operating on its own. Asking him to rest on his body, the discomfort brought about by the change in his energy was greatly reduced. A distant light appeared in his eyes. Wen Ting's mind seemed to have returned to the past. Qi Yu, do you know when I found out that you are Kirin? Qi Yu shook his head and said, Don't tell me you knew when I just entered Qingbei? But, at that time, my Kirin thundercloud force was still not strong. It shouldn't have much of an aura. Wen Ting smiled and said, Lotus pond moonlight drifting water. That day I felt it was you? Qi Yu looked at Wen Ting in shock. Wen Ting's simple sentence made him recall the scene when he and Ming Ming quarreled in Qingbei's small academy. At that time, he once felt that someone was spying on him. He didn't expect it to be Wen Ting. Wen Ting snorted and said, At that time I knew you were a bad guy. You actually told that kind of joke to a girl? Qi Yu chuckled and said, Women don't like bad guys. Didn't you still become my girlfriend? Ting, continue. I heard Grandmaster Chong Xing talk about the various prerequisites for the giant beast relic to appear. I really want to know about your background. A sorrowful aura filled the highest floor of Qian Sun. Wen Ting was silent for a while and said, Can you take out your Kirin Yin and let me have a look? Kirin Yin? Qi Yu looked at Wen Ting in his arms with some surprise. He stretched his right hand in front of his chest and the Kirin pearl flickered. The dark red Kirin Yin appeared out of nowhere in his palm. Wen Ting's delicate body trembled, and she struggled to sit up in Qi Yu's arms. Looking at the dark red Kirin octatic treasures and feeling the budding energy on it, tears uncontrollably flowed down her cheek. Seeing the tears flowing down Wen Ting's eyes, Qi Yu's alarm clock had a flash of inspiration. He seemed to have grasped something, but he didn't dare to be sure. Wen Ting's fair hands carefully held Kirin Yin as though she was holding the most precious treasure in the world. When the tears on her face fell on Kirin Yin suddenly emitted an extremely powerful aura. Even when Qi Yu first obtained it, he didn't feel such immense energy. Qi Yu had always known that any one of Kirin's octatic treasures possessed immense energy. He also believed that with the increase in his thundercloud force, he would be able to unleash the true power of Kirin's octatic treasures. However, he didn't know how strong the energy of Kirin's octatic treasures was. At this moment, when the energy of Kirin Yin fluctuated violently in Wen Ting's hands, he finally understood that the energy of Kirin's octatic treasures was actually so immense. One must know that Kirin Yin was ranked last in Kirin's octatic treasures. Daddy, I've finally seen you again. Although I knew you were with him a long time ago, I never had the chance to see you. Daddy, how I want to see you. Do you know? Qi Yu suddenly stood up. What did you say? Could it be that you're actually the child of Mr. Kirin and that ferocious fox? At this moment, thinking of his previous imagination, Qi Yu finally understood. He still clearly remembered every detail of the story of Kirin Yin that Xie Ji had told him. When the ancestor Kirin finally destroyed many enemies with the ultimate Kirin's arm and saved his wife, whom he loved and hated, before he died, in order to atone for his sins, he used the last of his energy to refine his skin into this Kirin's octatic treasures. At that time, the ferocious nine-tailed fox left silently. The reason why the ancestor Kirin wanted to protect her at all costs, in addition to his deep love for her, was probably also because of his love for his unborn child. And the reason why the fox chose to leave was probably because she was already pregnant. The ending that he could not understand at that time suddenly became clear at this moment. Looking at Wen Ting in front of him, Qi Yu's eyes turned red. How many misfortunes had happened to this girl? Whether it was her parents or herself, as a living relic of a giant beast, they all aroused strong sympathy. You know about my parents? Wen Ting choked with sobs. Qi Yu nodded gently and said, I roughly know a little. Ting, no wonder you said that you're a fire linfox. It turns out that you're actually their daughter. What about your mother? Wen Ting sadly shed tears and said, Yes, you're the heir of the mythical beast king. How could you not know such a major event in the family of the mythical beast king? Do you think that my mother was wrong? Or did my father implicate his own clansmen because of his lust for women? Qi Yu sighed and said, The past is the past, who's right and who's wrong now? Moreover, they were truly in love with each other. Although your mother left with an ulterior motive, she still gave her heart after all. It's just that the price paid for this matter was too great. It was a huge blow to both the ferocious beasts and the mythical beasts. Wen Ting said sorrowfully, Yes, the price paid was too great. Perhaps you would think that my father suffered the greatest pain, the woman he loved the most betrayed him, and all his relatives were killed by the enemy. But who knows how much pain my mother suffered? At least before my father knew it, he had always lived a happy life with my mother. But my mother suffered inhuman torment every day at that time. Can you imagine? How does it feel to love someone deeply, yet have no choice but to lie to them and hide the truth? The light on Kirin's body became even brighter. At the same time, the enormous energy began to fluctuate violently. As the energy fluctuated, a faint whimpering sound could be heard from the top floor of the Thousand-Seeker Pagoda, as if it wanted to pour out something. My father died, and my mother left silently. At that time, his heart had already sunk into sorrow. His mother walked aimlessly. Due to extreme grief, her mind was completely blank. Although my mother was not a powerful ferocious beast, she had always been with my father and was influenced by his energy aura. She was also very powerful. But can you imagine? Even with my mother's strength, she died after giving birth to me. It was not because of her own reasons, but because she did not have the will to live. If not for the fact that I was in her womb, she would have already followed my father. Ah, your mother passed away after giving birth to you. How did you live after that? Wenting's face revealed a trace of sadness. My mother could not bear to part with me after all. Before she gave birth to me, she invited her only friend to her side and entrusted me to her friend. I did not know about any of this for more than 100 years after my mother's death. I lived happily under her friend's care. It was only when my mother's friend found out that I was a rare living giant beast relic that she told me everything. She died in the hands of the ferocious beasts that coveted the giant beast relic while protecting me. There was a period of time when I did not know what was the point of living anymore. I really wanted to follow my parents and reunite with them in the underworld. Every time this happened, I would remember what my mother's friend, my adoptive mother, said before she died. She told me that I was the only child of my father and mother in this world, and also their last hope. She asked me to live on. That is why I have lived until now. When Chiyu heard this, he could no longer suppress the excitement in his heart. He suddenly took a step forward and pulled Wenting into his arms. He hugged her trembling body tightly. Kirin exuded a strong energy aura between the two of them. Wenting meekly leaned on Chiyu's chest. Only the aura from Chiyu's body could calm her sorrowful heart. Just as Chiyu was quietly using his heart to dissolve the sorrow in Wenting's heart, she suddenly clearly felt the two terrifyingly powerful energy waves. Chiyu felt it, and so did Wenting. She raised her head anxiously and said, "Hurry up and leave. It will be too late if you don't leave now. Leave with your friends. Take Grandmaster Chong Xing with you." With a faint smile, Chiyu's eyes revealed a strong light. He grabbed Wenting's shoulders with both hands and said, "Tingting, even if you don't know me, we will not retreat. Leave everything to me, okay? Use the last thing your father left to this world, and we will leave together. Don't worry, we Zodiac Guardian warriors are not that easy to deal with." "But, there are no buts," Chiyu directly interrupted Wenting's words. "No matter what, I will not let anyone hurt you. You've been hurt too much. Now that you've admitted that I'm your boyfriend, let me protect your dad, okay?" Wenting's face turned a little pale. She shook her head gently and said, "No, Chiyu, you don't know. Even Grandmaster Chong Xing does not really understand the strength of those two beasts. The reason why they have not attacked me is not because they are afraid of Chong Xing Temple. Although Chong Xing Temple had suppressed them before, it did not have much effect. One had to know that both the Swanee and the golden-winged eagle were among the most powerful ferocious beasts. There were two reasons why they had waited until now. First, it was because they were afraid of each other. After so many years, they were aware of each other's existence. They also knew that if one of them attacked, the other would definitely not sit idly by. Therefore, they had been waiting. From their point of view, Tao Wu was a great threat to the golden-winged eagle. Although the golden-winged eagle had no natural enemies, the true fire of Jumadi from Tao Wu's body was a kind of energy that it was very afraid of. However, in terms of cultivation base, the golden-winged eagle was much stronger than Tao Wu. After all, a late-stage ferocious beast was more than a level higher than a 6,000-year-old one. That was why they did not have absolute confidence in destroying it. Therefore, they had been waiting all this time. Moreover, there was another more important reason, and that was because of me. At their level of cultivation, their wisdom was already very developed. They all knew that even though I was a living relic of a giant beast, when I completed the 9th and final transformation, the energy in my body would be completely manifested. Only by absorbing it at that time would I be able to obtain more energy. Therefore, they had been waiting for this day to come. Now, I only have 1 to 2 days to complete the last transformation. They will not let me go no matter what.